Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D and WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the movie of what if Nagisa Shiota's Class 3E was frozen in time for 200 years. All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. 200 years is a long time. It feels even longer when you've spent those 2 centuries paralyzed but conscious, trapped in your own body as time moves on without you. No aging, no moving, no sleeping. Nagisa Shiota knows this now. He also knows that his fellow Class 3E members feel the same way. Most importantly, he knows that the man who has kept them in this state is going to free them today. The man was called Shiro once upon a time. He goes by a different name now, but in the eyes of Class 3E, he'll always be the man who had experimented on their beloved late teacher. Nagisa still remembers the vivid relief he'd felt when Shiro had hit the weaponized barrier surrounding their classroom and disintegrated. He also remembers the horror of finding out that Shiro had survived using an active invulnerability quirk. Only 1% of the population had shown quirks back then, but with Class 3E's luck it figures that Shiro would be able to plunder the abilities of others. Not that the class had known that at the time. It had been an accident. A small and confused child, an uncontrollable quirk, a group of teens with 2 of their teachers on their way to visit a mountaintop grave. It hadn't been a big deal then, not until said quirk was stolen, before it could be reversed, by a face they'd come to know all too well. Shiro had demanded to know if the class were unconscious and unaware of the outside world. It was a stroke of luck that the child hadn't known much about their new quirk and had stammered out a quick, unsure affirmative. Shiro had killed the kid and their parent, the only 2 eyewitnesses. He'd taken the frozen kids to his base and separated the teens from the 2 adults. The years had come and gone, a mind-numbing experience. Society changed around them, which they noticed when Shiro began using more words like hero, villain, and occasionally one for all. Quirks became the norm, and the freaks were now those without them, not those with. Nagisa had done his best to keep his mind sharp, carefully observing the part of the room visible to him, memorizing everything Shiro had said to his plain little assistants, and playing mental games with himself. He could only hope the rest of the class was doing the same. It had been the only thing keeping Nagisa from teetering over the edge of insanity. That, and the fact that he had been lucky enough to be frozen with his eyes open. All the same, there was a part of Nagisa that had wondered if they'd be stuck like this forever. Truly a different kind of torture. But for those 200 long years, he had learned. He'd observed, he'd listened, and he'd remembered. And Nagisa waited. When Shiro unfreezes him, Nagisa drops to his knees. His body may have been preserved, but his mind is unused to commanding his legs to support his weight. Shiro doesn't bother tying up the students. He has an abundance of quirks, after all, while the teens have none. He gathers all of the confused students into one room and stands at the front. His face has changed, melted off, more like, which the teens know is the fault of All Might, Japan's #1 hero. His voice, though, his voice is the same. I'm sure you all have many questions. Before you ask them, however, I have some things to say. Shiro flicks his head around, blank face turning toward each student's eyes for a millisecond as if he can see them. You all are going to need to stay here for some time. You see, I took the liberty of finding all of your parents, who were affected by the same quirk as you all. It doesn't seem like it, but you have been frozen in time for around 200 years. His voice is soft and sympathetic. He's a good actor. Nagisa can read people, though. It's always been one of his strengths. Although he knows it's coming, his breath involuntarily hitches when Shiro says, "You could see them again, you know. Your parents. One of my assistants is nursing them back to health, so stay with us until then." That's right. He thinks they have no idea what's going on. Mihara raises a trembling hand. Nagisa can't tell if the shaking is real or forced. Sir, will you let us stay here then? Until they heal. Yada's small voice adds, please. Good. Nagisa hadn't been the only one planning out the best course of action, then. He's so glad his class has faced the dangers they did in Class 3. Of course, Shiro says kindly. My name is All for One, but you may call me Sensei. That's right, like my own little army I can call upon whenever I need them. Shiro had been talking on the phone. Nagisa would never find out who was on the other end. But that didn't matter. He and the rest of the frozen students could gather important information from Shiro's words. No, none of them have quirks. It's better that way, though. They're all skilled, but still disposable. He'd paused as the person on the other end of the line spoke. A chuckle. They were trained by the Reaper. They pose no threat to me, but they'll be good minions. He'd hummed at the response he got. Simple, I'll give them the need to stay. They can. Let's see, I'll let them visit their parents and siblings or something. Nagisa had strained his hearing as Shiro walked out of the room, laughing. No, all their immediate relatives died years ago. They don't know that, though. They can't risk leaving if they think there's still a chance. It wasn't surprising, but that hadn't made it hurt any less. Nagisa couldn't even cry. Not in the state he had been in. He thought he would have, though, if he hadn't been frozen. Nagisa ends up rooming with Karma, Sugino, and Kimura. Shiro had acted apologetic about the cramped arrangements, but Class 3 had insisted that it was fine with the grateful reassurances expected of a group of uncertain teens being helped by a kind stranger. They subtly check for security cameras as they set up their futons, one in each room save for the bathroom and a microphone in each of the main living areas and kitchen. There are 3 exits in the building they're in, a front and back door, and a balcony door with a fire escape on the 2nd floor. Nagisa counts 12 windows, 3 of which are too small to crawl out of. There's a small chemical lab on the 1st floor. It's locked, but Nagisa can see through the window portion of the door that the room contains the largest window. He makes a mental map and memorizes it. The day crawls by. Shiro is civil, but the students can see past his facade. They know far more about him than he realizes, after all. It's the 2nd day when things get put in motion. Karma, Nagisa, Itona, Nakamura, and Okuda gather in Itona's room as night approaches. They huddle together, looking to anyone watching the security cameras like frightened children finding comfort in one another. Itona, it's done. Itona angles his phone screen away from the security camera, allowing the others to steal a peek. Ritsu winks at them from the screen. I shut my phone down earlier that day, before we froze, so I was able to turn it back on. I've also tinkered with it several times to add battery adjustments. It should last until, warning, maybe 7 or 8. Longer if I keep it off when we're not using it. Nagisa is so glad they have a gearhead among them. Nobody else's phones work, so they're reliant on Itona's for now. What's our window of time? Karma asks. Itona turns back to his screen. Ritsu, from 11 until 1. The rest of the class is ready. I've informed everyone of the plan. Karasuma and Arena are in the room at the end of the hall on floor 2. I've seen them in the cameras. They seem tired but unhurt. Once I got past the encryptions, I sent a Morse code message with the blinking light on the camera to inquire about their health. Arena blinked back that they were disoriented but unhurt. As for bindings, they are both handcuffed and the door is locked from the outside. Nakamura's lip twitches upward. Shiro is really underestimating them. Karasuma probably has lockpicking materials in his shoes and sleeves. Same with Arena. Nagisa can't help but smile a little bit as well. It's been a while since he'd heard her real name. After Koro-sensei's death, the class had collectively decided to drop the nickname. $10 says it's because they don't have quirks like he does, Karma adds. Okuda clears her throat. We're straying. Does everyone remember their parts? They nod. I was able to scour the lab through the screen. Mihara stood between me and the camera, so it should look like we were just conversing. He has what I need. She glances at Itona's phone. 9:32. 1.5 hours to go. Ritsu, have you relayed the plan to Arena? Ritsu salutes cheekily. Yes, ma'am. I also gave them the time, so they should be able to keep counting. Good. Their door is the same as ours, other than the lock? Yes. Kurahashi says it's hickory, one of the more durable woods. But with Karasuma, it shouldn't be a problem. Karma giggles. You guys, we're talking about defeating a quasi-immortal, ridiculously overpowered sensei. This is turning into somewhat of a habit, don't you think? They share a small laugh before quieting. He's not wrong. Nakamura takes a deep breath. Look, I know we agreed this is the best time for this, but it just all feels kinda rushed. Nagisa knows what she means, but we're prepared. We've got backup plans too, remember? Itona nods. Besides, you heard what he said. It has to be tonight. Hey, you, Shiro had called absent-mindedly, snapping in the direction of his assistant. His face had been glued to his screen. Which one is the muscular guy with the bicolored haircut? The assistant had consulted his clipboard. Terasaka Ryoma, sensei. Shiro had made a considering hum. Nagisa hadn't liked the sound of that. He will likely be one of the best candidates for the test Namo. They're all quirkless, so if my predictions are correct, they will be able to fit more quirks than my other experiments before losing brain function. Terasaka, though, he's the tallest and heaviest. His body should be able to handle the strain of a couple strength quirks. And if it works, he grinned, the expression particularly creepy due to the lack of eyes and a nose. He'll be one of the heaviest hitters in Japan. The male teacher is also an ideal candidate, but he's too skilled and unpredictable to let out of the room now. Maybe if I combine a couple students. He'd broken off, mumbling, before straightening. That's right, killing All Might. It's within reach. I can feel it. Shiro had absently touched what was left of his face. It's almost time. We'll unfreeze the brats tomorrow, and in 4 or 5 days, my preparations should be complete. We'll take him to the lab then, the one across town. The assistant had nodded and written something down. Shiro had walked past each frozen student, inspecting them with a smug tilt of his lips. He looked triumphant as the thought of having a small army of these gnomes he'd mentioned. It had been the look of someone who had complete control over a situation. If only he knew. Nagisa had been glad, at the time, that he was unable to move. He was certain that his horror would have shown clearly on his face if he'd still had control over his expression. Science may not have been his strong suit, but this wasn't hard to understand. Shiro had been talking about turning them into lab rats, stuffing them full of quirks until they were brain dead. Tomorrow, when they would be freed, they had to start planning. It's 11:09. Shiro is working at his computer in the basement where his office resides. It's 11:13. Shiro is entering the kitchen for a drink. It's 11:14. Shiro feels 2 knives slice down the back of his neck, severing his cervical nerves. Why didn't he sense anything? He catches a flash of blue in his periphery. He falls to the ground. That's okay. These children are foolish. He will not be beaten so easily. He has several healing quirks in his arsenal. He tries to access them. But why is his head so foggy? Why does he feel so much pain? It's everywhere. He can't think straight. Grasping at his quirks is like grabbing a cloud. He has quirks to fix himself. Why isn't he fixing himself? No, he is, just too slowly. He tries to call for his assistant. He's not sure he can hear himself speak, or if he's making any noise at all. If his mind were clear, perhaps he'd be trying to figure out what was happening. Perhaps he'd question the wine that he'd just drank, which tasted more nutty than he remembered. Perhaps he'd realize that the camera feed he's been watching has been on loop for some time. But between the pain running throughout his body and the fog in his head, he doesn't. He can't. He stays on the floor, unable to move as his vision slowly goes dark. It's 11:17. The entire operation takes just 17 minutes. The students and their 2 teachers don't stop running until they're at least 2 miles from the building. As they stop to rest, the teens turn toward their teachers. Irina's hair is slightly tousled, her pantsuit clean but wrinkled. Karasuma is holding his left arm carefully. His shoes are also scuffed from kicking down their door. He clears his throat. We couldn't get there in time because of the assistant. We took his files and left him borderline unconscious, but his quirk had to do with intelligence, so I'm sure he'll figure out a way to get up in around a minute. As for Shiro, the class holds their breaths. He isn't healing properly, but with help from his assistant, I won't be surprised if he survives long enough to get help. I'm sure he has connections with quirked healers that can also dissipate the effects of the hydrogen cyanide. On that note, good work, Okuda. She blushes, peeling off her gas mask. We got lucky. He had quite the chemical collection in there. I kind of wish I'd taken more things. Karasuma turns to Itona. Can you have Ritsu locate the nearest government building? I'm not familiar with this area, and a lot has changed. We also need to find a place to get clothes and food. As far as we know, it's just us now, from our time, so it would be pointless to find our old places. We can figure that out later. Ritsu gives them directions and they set off. It's nearly 20 minutes later when they spot a government office. The students wait outside while Karasuma and Irina head inside. The 2 teachers return from the building with twin expressions of frustration. It's no good. We were declared dead ages ago when we were never found. And they're unwilling to rehire us due to the fact that we don't have quirks. They told us to go to a police station to register and get ID and such. Irina nods. Between Karasuma and I, we've got enough money to at least get a charger for Itona's phone and some food. Let's find a library or somewhere else with charging outlets. Ritsu raises her hand on the screen. I've just located a building, a base of the Special Defense Force that's been abandoned in favor of a better location. My intel says that they don't remove the entry code for those who've died, so both of yours should still work. Karasuma straightens. Perfect. Can you show us the way? The base is on the edge of a city called Musutafu. It's 4 stories tall, with roof access. Karasuma puts in his agent code into the keypad and lets out a quiet sigh of relief when the light turns green. He pushes it open, using a keycard in his pocket to unlock the second door. Whoa, Sujino breathes. Nagisa surveys the interior. The room therein has a low ceiling, with somewhat drafty air. A tall desk rests in the corner, a thin layer of dust coating the smooth surface. The open doorway leads to a larger room with a staircase on one side and a large table taking up the center. There's a wall-to-wall whiteboard as well, indicating that it's a meeting room. Nagisa spots a restroom sign and back door symbol on a sheet of metal hanging from the ceiling. A couple of his classmates run up the stairs, laughing and whooping. Nagisa opens a window and peers up, where Karma grins down at him from the window above. Nagisa. He turns at the sound of Keano's excited voice. She's at the window next to Karma, which leads to the fire escape running down the building. There are actual rooms here. Good, maybe they can stay here for a while. Nagisa takes the stairs to the second floor where there are 3 bedroom-sized rooms, 2 offices, and a bathroom. And he can get us the fake IDs. For now, we can act as the kids' parents, but that's Karasuma's voice. 28, though. No, 27, Ritsu doesn't have a body. That's far too many. But since we're not in the system, the fake IDs mean we could just have more than one. We could each have several personas if worst comes to worst. That's Arena. I mean, the kids are mature enough that they don't always need supervision from the both of us. They're smart and Horo-sensei taught them well. Nagisa releases his breath quietly. It's true. If any class can survive in a world where they don't exist, it's probably them. He steps into the room. Is there anything I can do to help? The two turn to him, gazes softening. Just keep doing as you're doing, Arena tells him. You did great with the escape plan, and your classmates really respect you. Karma appears next to Nagisa. What are we going to do about schooling? Karasuma steps forward. Where we left off, you would be going into high school soon. I know you're all more mature and experienced than the average teen. What with our situation? But we need to get reintegrated into society and avoid suspicion. We can choose those later, and you kids can leave the paperwork and logistics to us. Nagisa nods. High school? Huh. Sensei. Shiro's assistant had sounded out of breath. He'd run into the room, eyes gleaming. I've just received a tip. Nenzu has asked All Might to teach at UA High School next year. Shiro's mouth had dropped before he'd burst into laughter. Oh, this is too perfect. This is our chance to take him down. If I'm right, and he's weakening, it shouldn't be too much of a challenge, especially considering that I'll be able to use the students as hostages. Maybe it's time to think about recruiting. And of course, I can also use the students to fight him, not just as hostages. All Might, weakening. That hadn't sounded good to Nagisa. He'd told himself that when they were free, he'd make sure he'd do what he could to keep society from crumbling. He'd seen it nearly happen once, and he wasn't very fond of the feeling. Nagisa remembers this conversation and makes up his mind. He sees a shift in Karma's expression too, and guesses that he's remembering the same thing. At least now he knows what high school he wants to go to. He doesn't want to let Shiro hurt anyone else, not if he can do something about it. And, well, it's been a while since he's gone to school, but he can say for sure that he's unlikely to forget anything he'd learned that year. Plus, it wasn't as if he hadn't spent 200 years unable to do anything but sit and think. Aizawa Shiota is not easily impressed. He's worked with many heroes and taken down countless villains. And it's not often that someone catches his eye by exceeding his expectations. The thing is, Aizawa knows hero society inside out. This is why he knows that things aren't black and white, no matter how hard society tries to make them out to be. He's met many so-called villains who wanted nothing more than to feed their starving family, or ones who didn't know any other kind of life. He's met vigilantes who were rejected by society and just wanted to help people in the ways they could. And maybe most importantly, he's met pro-heroes who are more innately villainous than the low-level thugs and criminals roaming the streets. There's one thing that most people have in common, though, and that's the way they treat quirks. In this world, quirks are everything. People tend to let their quirk determine their worth, their usefulness, and their path in life. A lot of it is caused by societal pressures, of course. Someone with a visual ability may be pushed to join the entertainment industry, while those with abilities that make people wary of them are often shunned to the point where they need to resort to illegal actions to survive. One thing Aizawa's noticed is that more often than not, people use their quirks to limit themselves. He's seen countless cases of children wanting to become a hero, a policeman, or a doctor, and only deciding not to because their quirk isn't suited for it. It makes him groan every time. In the end, those people are limiting themselves, and they shouldn't blame it on their quirk. After all, he doesn't see why someone without any special ability at all wouldn't be able to do any job they wanted. All in all, Aizawa has long since been disillusioned about the different sides of hero society. This is why 3 specific participants in the UA Hero Course practical exam catch his attention. It's not because they have flashy, powerful quirks, quite the opposite. He's never been a spotlight kind of guy, and these 3, they seemed closer to his style of fighting than anyone else. The first is a slim, athletic redhead. Aizawa checks his file. Name, Akabane Karma. Birth date, 12/25. Gender, male. Middle school, homeschooled. Quirk, Karma. Quirk description. Any person who harms him will have something of equal scale happen to their body within the next 24 hours. He peers at Akabane's test scores. A nearly perfect score. Aizawa looks back up to the monitor and finds the redhead again. He's running around the city taking down robots. But it's not his speed nor his stamina that Aizawa notices first. It's the quick, efficient way he's earning points. Forceful jabs to their weak spots. A feint to make one robot destroy another. Climbing on top of a 2-pointer to steer it into a group of robots. Weaponizing the weapons. Aizawa likes this one already. His quirk doesn't work on robots, and even if it did, he'd need to get really hurt in order to inflict damage on any of them. It's the first time he's seen a hero course contestant completely disregard their quirk, almost as if he's used to not being able to use it. In a way, it makes sense. After all, it's a quirk that requires him to get hurt to be of any use. He turns to the next file that catches his interest. Name, Shiota Nagisa. Birth date, 7/20th. Gender, male. Middle school, homeschooled. Quirk, bloodlust. Quirk description, can emit an unsettling feeling that affects those around him. It's undoubtedly a useful quirk, especially considering the disorienting factor, but it's effectively useless against hunks of metal. And yet, the blue-haired boy doesn't falter. He flits from robot to robot, grabbing scrap pieces of metal to jam into the circuit boards under their arms. Shiota had gotten good test scores as well. Not as good as Akabane's, but fairly impressive nonetheless. He seems to have done far better on the questions that required logical, real-world thinking and scenarios. Interesting. The third participant that Aizawa notices is a girl with long blonde hair. He'd noted her quirk early on while reading the students' files. It's a non-combative quirk, and wouldn't help her at all in this situation. This doesn't stop her from parkering over the robots' heads and knocking them over using their own weight. Name, Nakamura Ryo. Birth date, 8/24th. Gender, female. Middle school, homeschooled. Quirk, night vision. Quirk description, slightly enhanced vision in the dark. Aizawa is slightly suspicious, given that the three teens who have caught his attention have all been homeschooled. Not only that, but the fluid, confident way they move. They look trained. He can't help it. Aizawa is intrigued. What the fuck? Kan's voice is uncharacteristically quiet. The other staff follow his finger, which is pointing to a spot on the screen where two students are laying on top of a fake building with. Are those guns? Is that even allowed? Holy shit, why do those kids have rifles? Nedzu quiets the room with a wave of his paw. I checked their files. They both have licenses to carry these specific firearms, given by a government agent. They're not lethal to humans, however, the bullets are a special material. He turns back to the screen. On robots, though, Snipe, meanwhile, is practically salivating. Look at him. Y'all see this? Their aim is better than that of my third-year students. Nedzi nods. If you'd like, I can talk to them about enrolling in your advanced firearms class. They can join the third years. Midnight whistles as a shot from the girl goes straight through a robot's tread, halting it in place. I thought aim quirks were pretty rare, though. Nedzu chuckles. Oh, only the boy, Chiba Ryunosuke, has an aim quirk. It's actually documented as rather weak, indicating that he's just had a lot of practice. The girl, Hayami Rinka, has a quirk that improves her balance. Midnight quiets. It makes sense, remembering how the girl had scaled the side of the building with no fear. On the other hand, she's never seen someone with such accurate shooting abilities who wasn't aided by their quirk. Nedzu watches the screens intently. He takes in the explosive boy with a ridiculous amount of villain points, the timid boy who's only earned rescue points, the two young snipers, and the rest of the homeschooled group that's been showcasing an unprecedented amount of professionalism and experience. It seems this year will be interesting. Karasuma and Irina had looked over the high school applications they were handed. They'd flipped through them before looking up. So, quite a few of you want to attend UA? Huh. Irina had called forward those who said they'd apply. Why don't we all introduce ourselves and our quirks so we can get used to them? Karasuma had given a nod. You can all keep your names. I've buried all records of you from the past. So for all intents and purposes, you're just normal, homeschooled teens that were absolutely not born 200 years ago. The class laughs. You're all orphans, and have been adopted by various identities of myself and Irina. We're both still government agents, by the way. He'd put air quotes around government agents, and Irina had put a finger to her lips in a playful shushing gesture. It was a good thing that Karasuma had been skilled at paperwork forgery and that Irina had some hacking experience. Nagisa, not for the first time, had been glad he had such cool teachers. Karma had been the first to step up and explain his fake quirk. Wow, that's perfect for a sadist like you, Nagisa had teased. Let me guess, you're going to be the karma that gets those who hurt you. Of course, Karma had grinned. And if I can't hurt them back for some reason, you can just do it for me. Karasuma had rolled his eyes but then conceded that it was actually fairly smart. Hopefully it will dissuade anyone from really trying to hurt you. Nagisa had gone next. Everyone seemed to like his choice of fake quirk. Bloodlust. That fits you well, Irina had agreed. Brings me back to the time with Takeaka. Mihara had nodded. It can be pretty creepy sometimes. This way, nobody will question it. Nagisa had just laughed awkwardly. I can't tell if that's a compliment or not. Hayami and Chiba had explained their quirks next, and Chiba mentioned that after hearing of Shiro's plans, he wanted to join the hero course to protect the UA students. Aside from Nagisa, Karma, Ryo, Chiba, and Hayami, there were some members of the class who had decided to apply to other UA departments. I figure I can keep building things if I join the support course, was Itona's explanation. UA is obscenely rich, so they've gotta have some good materials. As for my quirk, I've made these contacts that change color. I'll just put down that I can change my eye color at will. Okuda had shuffled her feet. I've heard there's also a portion focused on chemical support rather than mechanics. I'd find that interesting, I think. I've decided not to come up with a fake quirk and just say I'm quirkless. Irina had hesitated but ultimately nodded. If you're sure, remember that at the moment, quirklessness is extremely rare in your generation. You may become a target for bullies. Okuda steels herself. I can take care of myself. Karasuma had to hide a smile. Her confidence had come a long way. Turahashi had gone next. Being as empathetic as she is, she'd claimed that she could probably fake a minor emotion-based empathy quirk, meaning that she'd be affected by others' strong feelings. Selling beetles on the mountain at Kunujikayaka has made me curious about the industry, so I'll be applying to the business course. Takebayashi had said he'd join the same course. His inclination toward statistics had made his choice entirely unsurprising. He'd gone with a minor intelligence quirk. Yada had slung an arm around Megu. I was going to do the same, to make use of Irina's lessons on blackmail, deception, and negotiation, but decided to try for general education instead. Same with Megu. Starting now, my quirk is persuasion. She'd winked. They'd decided that Ritsu can be Megu's quirk. Though she'd still talk with the other Class 3E members with the phones Karasuma had managed to get them. It was a good thing that their base still had supplies stocked up in various places. The others who'd said they'd be applying for general education were Terasaka, Heizama, Isagai, and Mihara. The rest of the class had decided to go to smaller name high schools in or near Musutafu. This is perfect. We have a few of you in a well-resourced school to gather information, not to mention the one that may become Shiro's target. It's also good that some of you are staying at lesser-known schools to avoid suspicion. Karasuma had hummed in agreement at Irina's words. Irina has put down Enchantress as her quirk, pretty self-explanatory, and I've decided on enhanced reflexes. It shouldn't be too odd with my training. Terasaka had raised a hand. What about weapons? I don't know if it's just me, but ever since the year with Koro-sensei, I've only felt comfortable when I have a knife or other weapon on me. The class had nodded. They all knew what he'd meant. Don't worry about it. There's weapons stored all over the base. I'll show you where in a moment. He'd stopped and sighed. I'm talking about giving a bunch of kids weapons. I sound crazy. Irina had let out a giggle. They're not just any class, though. Karasuma's gaze had softened. No, they're not. Do I really have to wear the tie? Karma complains. It takes so long to put on. Maybe I'll just bring it with me. Nagisa sighs and ties it for him. It's the first day. At least try to make a good impression. What? Karma teases. You don't think my natural charm is enough? No, Nagisa deadpans. He ignores Karma clutching at his heart dramatically and instead turns back to his own reflection to adjust his uniform. They'd been relieved when their acceptance letters came. All 5 students sitting comfortably in the upper half of the point range for the practical exam and close to the top on the written part. Itona and Okuda had blew their support test out of the water and apparently made a rather eccentric friend. The 2 of them, along with the management and general education students, had already left for UA on the early train. Rio pokes her head into their room and sighs. Come on, we're going to be late. Hurry up. Shiba and Hayami are waiting. They barely make it on time. Shiba and Hayami part ways with the other 3 at the Class 1B door, the sniper's assigned class. Nagisa stops in front of the room 1A. It's only a year of assassin training that keeps him from stepping on the yellow sleeping bag that rolls past them into the room. It unzips and a man steps out, turning to the trio that's still in the doorway. Don't bother sitting down, we're all going to the training grounds. Put these on and meet me there. The man motions to a box on his desk and walks out of the classroom. So this is UA. The man, Aizawa Shiota, turns out to be their teacher. He announces that they're going to do a quirk apprehension test. Missing the amused looks the 3E trio send each other. Aizawa says the person who comes in last place will be expelled, but Nagisa would bet his left kidney that he's lying. Not, per se, that he isn't going to expel whoever comes in last. He just doesn't think it's the only criteria. It's mostly likely going to be time for their teacher to judge their effort, creativity, and potential rather than their current talent level. The statement is to motivate them, to draw out their best performance. Nagisa is sure of it. Of course, that doesn't mean he isn't putting forth his best effort. The first test is the 50-meter dash. After seeing a brunette with pink cheeks use her touch-based quirk on her clothes, making them seemingly float, Nagisa has an idea. He whispers it to Karma and Rio, and they nod. Nagisa sidles up next to the girl and introduces himself. She says her name is Uraraka. Well, Uraraka, I actually don't have a quirk that would help me out on these tests, and I was kind of hoping you'd do me a favor. When it's Nagisa's turn, Karma picks him up by both wrists before moving to the start line. Aizawa is confused but waits. At the go, Karma spins around, releasing Nagisa when he points down the track, and Nagisa flies like a missile. Rio, standing on the other end, catches him with an oomph and gives a thumbs up to Uraraka. Release. His time is 3.4 seconds. The blonde boy with explosions dancing in his palms snarls. What the fuck was that? You think it's okay to just cheat like that right in front of me? You think you're too good for the rules, I bet. Aizawa pinches the bridge of his nose. It's not cheating, Bakugo. That's called using your brain. Nagisa made the decision to ask for help, knowing that he didn't have any advantages in this field. Bakugo scoffs, crossing his arms. Nagisa can see the minuscule narrowing of Aizawa's eyes, and realizes that the only reason he's allowing this is because he's curious, maybe even suspicious, of the trio. Karma eyes Bakugo with a glint in his eye. Oh no, Nagisa knows that look. That's as oh, you get angry easily. It'll be fun to rile you up, then look. It's often pointed at Terasaka. The tests continue. Despite being quirkless, the 3E trio all have impressive athletic abilities and manage not to drop to the bottom where a freckled boy, a girl with aux cords hanging from her ears, and a boy with a lightning bolt in his hair currently reside. During the endurance run, Karma has the luck to go after a girl called Yaoyorozu, who'd created a motorcycle to ride. Karma just laughs and uses it for his turn as well. Yaoyorozu looks uncertain of how to feel but settles for a hesitant smile in his direction. She seems surprised but grateful when he advises her to be careful of what she makes during a fight, since anything she discards can be taken and used against her. Aizawa eyes the pair thoughtfully, but doesn't say anything. During the ball throw, Karma and Nagisa simply copy the form they've seen Sugino use when the boy plays baseball. They get respectable but not particularly standout scores. Karma unsurprisingly gets the higher of the two. Ryo, on the other hand, has apparently spent the time in between events conversing with Dark Shadow, a bird-headed boy's quirk. Takoyami had been surprised at her treatment of his quirk, mentioning that many forget that it's sentient and has feelings and opinions. Dark Shadow, in turn, is all too happy to stand near the circle when Ryo launches the ball and give it a good whack as it begins to slow, increasing her score by 100 meters. Aizawa looks at Takoyami, who shrugs and says that Dark Shadow does what Dark Shadow wants. Bakugo seethes the entire time. When the tests conclude, Karma is in 10th place, Ryo in 12th, and Nagisa in 13th. This reinforces Nagisa's idea that they weren't just being judged on their performance, since he likely would have gotten closer to last place if that were true. The kid in last, Midoriya, bursts into tears when Aizawa tells them that expulsion was just a motivational ruse to make them try their best. Karma, on the other hand, bursts into laughter at Ryo's scowl. She huffs, pulling out some coins and counting out 500 yen into Nagisa's hand. Aizawa sighs, rubbing his temples as the rest of the class gapes at the trio. Nagisa tunes out the strict boy's lecture about making bets at school. It doesn't seem like Aizawa minds much, anyway. Netsu sits in his office, drinking tea and digesting what he's just learned about his new students. He does that a lot. The tea drinking bit, he means. After all, he can't say it's often that he finds out 14 of his students, all adopted by the same couple under different names, were born over 200 years ago. It had been difficult to figure out, but with Netsu, it's hardly possible to hide things from him when he gets curious. His hunch had led him to dig around a bit. Once he'd found the original files dating their existence in the time when quirks were an oddity, as well as their missing persons reports, he'd put the pieces together fairly quickly. A lot of them likely didn't even have quirks. He sees it now. All of the quirks they've listed on their files could be faked one way or another, and yet it would be nearly impossible to prove it. The question stands, what to do with this information? He isn't about to make it public. Not yet, anyway. Who knows what the media will turn it into? He could confront them about it, or just observe the way things play out. He also wants to meet these kids' guardians. He wants to know how they got here, what they're planning on doing, and what their motivations are. The thing is, this whole situation is a grand puzzle. And if there's one thing Netsu loves, it's puzzles. Notes, Netsu knows, is this bad or could it be a good thing? So, quirks. Some I hope are more obvious, like Karma's, Chiba's, and Nagisa's. As for Ryo, it's stated that she can see pretty well in the dark compared to the other students, so I decided that she could fake a weak night vision quirk. Plus, Hayami is known for her good balance, shown with her upside-down shooting skills and her ability to snipe accurately from various positions. As for Itona, I think he'd definitely make something for his fake quirk, hence the contacts. It makes sense to me that Ritsu could pose as a student's quirk, similar to Dark Shadow is to Takoyami, except a digital companion, counterpart. I hope it kind of makes sense. Yada is stated to have been one of Arena's more receptive students, and her talents lie in her deception and negotiation, which is why I gave her a fake persuasion quirk. On another note, the students I booted from wanted to make room for the 3-3 students are Mainta, Koda, and Hagakure. Not because I don't like them, but because I feel that they aren't very major characters and don't play as big of a role. I mean, they have their moments, but this story is centered around the S-Class crew. Also, this chapter wasn't very eventful nor secretive, spy-themed, but I promise things will pick up next chapter. Are these notes too long? Anyway, I hope you guys are enjoying the series. Let me know if you want to see more. I always love feedback, D. If you got this far, thanks for reading. Glitch signing off. I am here, coming through the door like a normal person. All Might booms, coming through the door decidedly not like a normal person. Nagisa knows that All Might is the #1 hero in Japan. But he's also incredibly tacky and incredibly loud, and Nagisa has an incredibly painful headache. He kind of wants to shush him. Not that it would go over well. All Might goes on to explain that for their first hero course, they'll be changing into their hero costumes and doing battle training. Yes, this is what Nagisa has been looking forward to. It's clear that the rest of the class is excited too. He can see Karma and Ryo smirking at each other. Nagisa can't say he's that surprised when he gets some double takes as he walks into the boys' locker room, but nobody stops him. He's guessing the uniform he's wearing is enough. As he opens his suitcase, nostalgia and pride war in his mind. He pulls out the blue fabric. All 5 of the 3 hero course students had designed their costumes together, and anyone who looked at the group would be able to tell. Nagisa had based his design on their PE assassination uniforms from Kanuja. First, he pulls on a thin, form-fitting navy shirt that covers everywhere up to the top of his collarbones and down to the edges of his wrists where they disappear into tactical gloves with built-in brass knuckles. He slides his legs into blue-gray cargo pants with knee pads and multiple pockets, tightening his belt. The hooded half-sleeve jacket he pulls over his head is the same color as his pants. He'd requested the fabric to be slash-proof and fire-proof, and the top jacket had been woven with Kevlar that can reduce the damage of a bullet exponentially. You can never be too safe. His combat boots are snug and comfortable, and have little attached knives that slide out of the heel when he flicks them outwards. He also sticks a small skin-toned earpiece behind his ear, courtesy of Itona and Ritsu. The 3 members had decided to keep in touch without the school's interference as well. A tiny golden E adorns his collar. Karma's costume is similar, with only small personal changes he'd requested. They also have a vastly different assortment of weapons on them. Wow, are you guys planning on becoming a hero duo? Karma shakes his head at Kirishima. We've shared an unforgettable experience together, and we want to honor it. There are a couple others who will look similar. You'll see. They do, see, when Ryo steps out of the girls' locker room in an identical outfit, save for her shorts. You all look amazing. All Might declares. Nagisa's glad he'd had the forethought to pick up some pain medication from Recovery Girl. The ache in his head is already fading considerably. All Might explains the rules and has them draw lots. Nagisa is thoroughly unimpressed. Why does the pro hero think this is even remotely a good idea? Other than himself, Karma, and Ryo, the Class 1A students likely have had little to no training before this, and he decides to pit them against each other inside a building far enough that he wouldn't be able to jump in immediately if there's a problem. His students don't yet have a good understanding of each other's quirks, nor has he ensured that they know basic self-defense. This seems more like an activity for the 2nd or 3rd week of school. Not to mention, if Nagisa had designed this training lesson, he'd have organized the teams himself. He sees the merit in them being random, but the matchups only need to be unknown to the students beforehand. He'd separate the students who'd gone to the same middle school to avoid friends who know each other well being paired together, and the same goes for the opposite. After all, any kid holding a grudge could easily use this opportunity to pull something that normally wouldn't be allowed. But, back to All Might. Nagisa looks at the name he pulls, glancing around until he meets the eyes of a boy with hair that's split down the middle, one side red, one side white. He walks over. Todoroki, right. Nagisa, your partner. Todoroki studies him before giving a curt nod and turning away. Damn, okay. Nagisa checks who they're going up against. Shiro Hanta and Kirishima Ijiro? Nagisa's group is first up. As the heroes, they're given time to plan while Shiro and Kirishima set up. Just stay out of my way and leave this to me. Nagisa stares at Todoroki incredulously. Seriously? I'm going to freeze the building and you are going to get caught in it if you don't do as I say. Nagisa snorts. That seems like an awfully quick way to lose the exercise, or at the very least, show All Might that neither of us can work on a team. I don't need to, Todoroki says stiffly. I will be the strongest on my own. I have to. Wow, there's a lot of issues to unpack there. Nagisa points out. If this were a real-life scenario, freezing the building could set off the bomb since we don't know how it's operated. We'll lose the battle trial if you do that. Well, he amends, if All Might shows a little competency, that is. Todoroki clenches his jaw. Then what do you propose we do? We make a plan, Nagisa replies easily. Both of us. What's your quirk? Ugh, that's not the question you should ask, Todoroki. You know, my biggest assets aren't my quirk at all. If the question is what can you do, I'm skilled in close combat martial arts, strategy, and can use the various weapons support made for me. My quirk is basically, freaking people out. Don't give me that look, it's what it does functionally. Todoroki thinks it over. Okay, then we'll do this. Karma watches his friend from the control room. Poor Kirishima and Shiro, he hears someone whisper. They've got to go against Endeavor's son. He feels his lip twitch minutely and turns slightly to face the pink-skinned girl. It's not him they should be worried about. When Nagisa and Todoroki enter the building, it's from different areas. For one thing, the window Nagisa crawls through is 4 stories higher than Todoroki's. When he gets inside, he taps his comm to let his partner know. I also hear footsteps passing me, heading down to you. Judging by the somewhat clunkier sounds, I'm gonna guess Kirishima, since he's coming from above. That means Zero is probably setting up tape traps on the top floor where the bomb is. I'm going in. Are you okay with dealing with Kirishima? He waits for confirmation before crawling back outside the building, pulling himself up through a 5th-floor window silently. He sees Zero staring intently at the one door in the room, stance ready. When Nagisa drops into the room, Zero catches sight of him in his periphery and turns to face him. The window, perfect for a cowardly hero like you, Zero smirks, getting into the villain persona. But this is as far as you get. He shoots tape from both elbows toward Nagisa. Zero's quirk is mighty useful, but once you know what it is, there are weaknesses you can exploit. Nagisa grabs the tape strands, one with each hand. He allows the ends to wrap around each arm before gripping the taut strips between them and yanking hard. Zero shoots forward, surprised, and Nagisa gives him a quick chop to the back of the head. As Zero lands in a heap on the ground, dazed, Nagisa wraps the capture tape around him. Zero of the villain team, and Kirishima too. The villain team has been captured. Hero team wins. All Might's voice sounds in Nagisa's earpiece. Todoroki doesn't speak on the way back to the viewing room, but he does nod once at Nagisa. Zero, on the other hand, runs up to him. Shiota, right. That was awesome, dude. Didn't even see it coming. Nagisa, he responds automatically. Please call me Nagisa. It's what I'm used to. Okay. The other battle trials go about as expected. Karma and Asui beat Jiru and Kaminari quickly and efficiently. What's up with that? Jiru had said, odd. I couldn't hear Akabane's footsteps, even with my enhanced hearing. Karma, the boy corrects. You too. Though Mina ends up being beaten by Ryo's team, the two apparently both share a love for gossip and exchange phone numbers after the exercise. Everything is fun and lighthearted until Midoriya and Bakugo destroy the building and each other. Nagisa doesn't see how All Might hasn't realized that the match had turned personal the moment the two were paired against each other. He tells All Might his suspicions, pointing out the panic in Midoriya's eyes whenever Bakugo starts letting off explosions and his instinctual flinch, and All Might agrees to talk to Midoriya. Nagisa's not stupid. He sees the way All Might clearly seems focused on the green-haired boy and the way they interact. He looks at the boy in a mentor-like way, a look he's seen on Koro-sensei when it comes to the E-class. He sets his suspicions aside for the moment. The cafeteria is filled with chatter. Nagisa, Ryo, and Karma enter through the double doors and look around for familiar faces. They catch sight of Irina and Okuda, sitting at a table otherwise empty save for a girl with bubblegum hair and a lavender-haired boy who looks like he hasn't slept since the first Quirk Wars. As they make their way over, Zero calls out to Nagisa, "Hey, can we sit with you guys?" He shrugs. Sure. Zero, followed by Mina, Kaminari, Jiru, Kirishima, and Bakugo, join the trio. When they reach the table and sit down, Itona looks up. Couldn't find the oaf. He hands a Swiss Army knife to the bubblegum-haired girl, who's fiddling with a palm-sized something. Seems he's found a fellow gearhead. The oaf, Kirishima questions. Terasaka, probably. Itona nods, so Ryo continues. He's sitting at a full table with Chiba, Hayami, and the Gen Ed kids. At this, the tired boy seems to tense minutely. A Gen Ed student, perhaps. Mei snaps her fingers absently in Itona's direction, still fully focused on her invention. Itona pulls a screwdriver out of his pocket and hands it to her without looking up from his food, taking the Swiss Army knife back and sliding it into his jacket. The awkward silence is broken by Mina and Ryo giggling at the sight of something at the other end of the cafeteria. They hurry in that direction, whispering. Karma turns to Bakugo, who's angrily stabbing at his food. It looks like pork. Whoa, buddy, I promise it's already dead. His teasing voice makes the other boy's head snap up. Bakugo snarls at him, and Karma smiles lazily. You know, you kind of remind me of Terasaka, in a way. Brute strength, not much brains, angered easily. Sound familiar? Kirishima has to hold Bakugo back from taking a swing at Karma. Nagisa knows that Karma's just trying to get a rise out of him. They both know that Bakugo is extremely intelligent. His pride, though, it always seems to win out in the end. Just as Kirishima loses his grip on Bakugo, a loud alarm begins to blare. They're told that it means someone breached the school's security. Nagisa shares a look with Karma and the two of them slip away into the crowd. Once they're out of the chaotic cafeteria, they ask Ritsu on Karma's phone where the intruders are. She tells them that the cameras near the teacher's lounge seem to have been tampered with. When they reach the door, a hooded figure steps into a smoky purple mass and disappears. They don't notice the two students watching. Knocking on the door labeled principal is scary. Nagisa supposes it's because of his previous standing at the very bottom of his school in the class called N. Maybe he'd have negative thoughts associated with principals forever. The first thing Nedzu does when they walk in is gesture to the seat in front of him. Have a seat. When Nagisa explains what they saw to Nedzu, his reaction is not what they expect. He folds his paws and hums thoughtfully. I appreciate that you came to tell me. To be perfectly honest with you, I noticed that the camera feed was off as well, and when I entered the system, I noticed a friend who'd snuck in. He turns around his computer monitor, showing it to Nagisa and Karma. Ritsu waves back sheepishly. Oh, I suppose now would be a good time to tell you that I know of your secret. Nagisa and Karma tense but don't make any other movements. You can relax. I'm not going to do anything about it. The yet remains unspoken but hangs heavily in the air. In fact, I'd like to propose a deal. Would you mind giving a call to your legal guardians? That way I can ask you all at once. Once Karasuma and Arina are on the other end of the line, the phone in speaker mode, Nedzu begins. I was initially intrigued when all of the students that were homeschooled according to their files were all extremely impressive in the areas they tested in during entrance exams. It wasn't until I dug deeper that I found older files, extensively buried, well done by the way, that dated your births a couple centuries ago. I brushed off the similar concerns a colleague of mine showed and hid the files from him. Karasuma's doubtful voice sounds through the speaker. Why didn't you tell anyone else? Nedzu grins, and the boys lean back at the sight of his tiny, sharp teeth. It's more fun to keep these puzzles to myself. Nagisa shakes his head to try to clear all thoughts of how unhinged his principal looks. Irina sounds as distrustful as her pseudo-husband. What do you want from us? Like I said, I'd like to propose a deal. On your side, you get full discretion and protection from myself. I'd stop anyone from snooping into your past business, as well as help you obtain any resources you may need. Karma narrows his eyes, and in return, Nedzu looks him in the eye. I have two requests. First of all, based on what I've seen, you and your companions are experienced and intelligent. I'd like you to protect my students. There are many pro heroes teaching here, of course, but it would be lovely to have someone looking out for them in the times that they can. He taps a nail against the smooth wood of his desk. And the second request, Nedzu corrects. And it's this, I still have no knowledge on how you're here when you were all born when quirks first began appearing. His eyes glitter as he leans forward, the tilt of his snout greedy for knowledge. I want to know everything. Once Karasuma and Arina agree to Nedzu's deal. Not seeing much of a choice, he leans back in his seat. Now that that's settled, there's some things we need to be ready for. I'd like to hear your story, but right now there are more pressing matters to discuss. His gaze darkens a bit. When I noticed the camera that was tampered with, Miss Ritsu here helped me clear out the fake footage and we were able to see what happened in the teacher's lounge. The figure, whom I was unable to identify, used their quirk to make copies of several documents, including the schedule of Class 1A, the lesson plans and notes for our upcoming field trip to the USJ for rescue training. And perhaps most notably, the plans for this year's sports festival. It's not a stretch to assume that someone is planning to attack UA for reasons unknown. If the documents they took are any indication, we should be prepared for multiple attacks. Though we may not know who's behind them, we do know where and when they'll attack, if at all. After a muffled, unintelligible exchange on the other end of the phone, Karasuma speaks. We have information. A tip of sorts. It may not be the person we are thinking of at all, but it's entirely possible that a man we are acquainted with has the goal of killing All Might and wants to use his position here against him. Nagisa watches Nedzu scribble something down. He hums, looking pensive. Someone from your past, huh? He leans forward and Nagisa can see steel in his eyes. I'm listening. Are Karma, Ryo and Nagisa all absent today? Midoriya startles at the question, glancing at their empty seats before turning back to Asui. I guess. I'm surprised. Don't we have a field trip today? Asui nods, tapping her chin. It doesn't seem like something they would skip. I hope nothing's wrong. Aizawa sighs. Nedzu has informed me that they have business with him and will join us later at the USJ. They're fine. Bakugo's mind, meanwhile, is racing. There's something off about those students. Not to mention, a meeting with Nedzu. What could those extras have done to earn his attention? The year's barely started. As Aizawa reassures his students, the pro hero's mind wanders to his conversation with Nedzu. The principal had waved away his suspicion, only saying that he had some things to discuss with the students. He'd promised to fill Aizawa in later, when he needed to know. Aizawa internally winces. Nedzu's plans, though, sometimes it was a better idea to stay out of them. Nedzu's voice had suddenly turned impossibly sharp. He called himself what? All for one, Karasuma had repeated. A beat of silence. Nedzu had released a long breath and steepled his paws. Sitting here with Arina made him feel like this was a parent-teacher conference. Only, Nedzu was the superior. And he was one of the pseudo-parents. All for one is somewhat of a legend in the underground. I would say myth, but I know that he is very much real. A colleague of mine was severely injured by him a few years ago. We knew him before we were affected by the quirk, when he still went by Shiro. He's always been formidable. When they'd told the principal how they'd escaped, his eyes had hardened and he'd seemed less than pleased. Not, Karasuma gasped, because of what they did to Shiro. Rather, it was likely that what gave Nenzu pause was the fact that it was a class full of young teens that had seemingly no issue with poisoning and stabbing a man. Some of my students heard him planning ways to stop us by force if we'd asked or tried to leave. He also had a quirk that would alert him if we were to do so much as step outside. There wasn't another way. Karasuma had wondered if he'd looked as stiff as he'd felt. Irina had seemed tenser than usual beside him, as well. With all due respect, Nenzu, if we hadn't escaped when we did, our students would have been turned into lab rats. We had no choice. Trust us on that. Something had flashed in Nenzu's gaze at the mention of lab rats. After a long pause, some of the tension in his shoulders had dissipated. I believe you. I do hope you can understand some of my concerns. Of course. However, Class 3 will bring no harm to anybody at this school. Irina's gaze had softened almost imperceptibly. They're good kids, and they've been through a lot together. Nenzu had let them finish their story before asking them to bring willing members of their class to his office the following day. We can get started planning for the USJ attack when they're all here. I've notified Aizawa that we're pushing the trip back an hour. We may need to inform him of your circumstances for extra security, as he can help if the rest of Class 1 starts to get suspicious. He's a trustworthy man. However, I'll leave that decision up to you. Irina and Karasuma had looked at each other and nodded. They'd consider it. Nenzu had continued. If the attack is connected to All for One, or Shiro, as you call him, his goal is to kill All Might. While to most it may seem unattainable, the man is crafty. I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to weaken number 1, at the very least. I want to avoid that, so I'm going to arrange for him not to show up until the villains are dealt with. There's also the small chance that these nomes you mentioned are already usable in this attack. Do you have a counter if this happens? Karasuma had nodded. As of right now, Namu do not have free thought. They're more like mindless beasts, only following orders from their master. All we need to do is take out the one giving the orders, and they become harmless. Very well. Do you have the weapons and materials you need? Karasuma had shaken his head. All right, I'll pull some strings and I can have them ready in time. Since we're going for minimal casualties, I assume tranquilizers will do. Karasuma assures him that tranks are perfect. It's a good thing the class has experience with combat. As they'd stood up to leave, Nenzu had given a little smile, eyes glittering. Oh, and Miss Irina, I'm quite flattered that you think I look soft. It's the keratin, you know. However, I do my best to avoid actions such as petting. That would imply that I'm a domesticated creature, and I assure you, I'm anything but. Irina could believe it. Everyone in position. Yep, Rio responds through her adhesive calm. Gender, semi. Karma snickers. So they're using their old code names, then. Nagisa sighs. We're both ready, English. I'm heading to the control room now. Once he gets there, he listens to Nenzu's instructions, one hand at the tiny device behind his ear. Nenzu tells him to use the fingerprint sensor. It's the reason I scanned your prints when we started planning, he explains. I've already added you to the database, so you should have access. He's proven right when the surveillance screens, as well as a panel of bright keys and labeled mechanisms, were to life. He pushes the buttons, pulls the levers, and adjusts the knobs Nenzu instructs him to, and slowly, the USJ changes. The water is drained out of the flood section in a foamy spiral. The conflagration zone and avalanche zone are deactivated and stabilized, and the temperature in the large dome evens out. Despite their hopes that they can take care of this quickly, they want to make sure that the villains don't have anything they can use to their advantage. By the time everyone is in position, it's nearly the point when Class 1 would have arrived if they'd kept their schedule. It takes 8 minutes for something to happen. Down there, in the plaza, Nagisa's voice has the assassins snapping to attention. On a screen, Nagisa can see a smoky mass coalesce in the center of the building. The first person to step out of the mist is a figure wearing formal clothing and an intricate mask. They're followed by a bulky, tall creature with an exposed brain and a beak. As it stands awkwardly by the masked figure, as if waiting for orders, Nagisa realizes what it is. There's a Namu here, he whispers to Nenzu, although there's no way for anyone to hear him from outside the control room. He shudders, realizing that it could have been Terasaka or any of them down there. It seems to be obeying the masked person. A large cluster of people with menacing expressions spills out of the portal, and he hears Nenzu hum. From what I can see on the monitor that I've connected with, I recognize some of those faces from police reports. They seem to be street thugs and common criminals, mostly. Not particularly powerful on their own, but crafty enough to escape arrest. My guess is that they were supposed to have dealt with the students while the Namu took on All Might. The group spreads around, presumably searching for the students they'd been told would be there. In about 5 seconds, most of the thugs are on the ground unconscious, victims of a certain pair of snipers' exceptional aim. Ryo sends tranquilizing arrows at the remainder, her marksmanship allowing her to graze their bodies without causing much damage. For having such little practice with a bow and arrow, she's startlingly capable. Hinata then drops from a high-up beam and takes care of the rest, agile body flipping around as she slashes at the confused criminals. They crumple one by one, hostages to the paralytic agent coating the knives. Soon, the only figures standing are the smoky purple figure, the masked person, and the hulking, beaked beast. Before the masked figure can regain their bearings and order the Namu to act, an arrow from Ryo flies toward them in the air. They quickly lift a hand, and to Nagisa's frustration, as soon as their fingers graze the weapon, it turns into a teal marble and drops to the floor. Hirajiri, the smooth, masculine voice starts, presumably directed at the one with the warping quirk. They don't get to finish their sentence. As the figure follows the trajectory of the arrow to see who had shot it, a marble-sized capsule rolls to a stop at their feet. Before anyone can react, it bursts, sending a large cloud of gray smoke straight into their face. Apparently, and luckily, the mask is just for show and serves no function against gas. The person slumps to the ground, unconscious. The purple misty mass hovers for a minute before scooping up the stationary blank Namu and the masked figure and vanishing. They've escaped. On the plus side, we have some criminals we can question and arrest. Nedzu doesn't sound too bothered, just thoughtful. He's probably relieved the operation was quick, clean, and resulted in no casualties on their side. They've also gained some good information. Kurajiri, warp quirk, unknown name, marble compression quirk. Namu, which they'd known likely had multiple quirks and of which they now know the size and appearance of. I wish I could have used the chili gas instead of the modified anesthetic. Karma complains. You made chili gas. There's horror in Hinata's voice. Okuda made it for me, actually. Nagisa sighs. Okuda, you have to stop enabling him. She just snorts good-naturedly. It's entertaining, though. A sharp inhale from Ritsu has Nagisa checking his phone. This is bad, she mutters. Bad, bad. Ritsu, what is it? She pulls up a scan. Look at this. I knew I recognized the look of its skin. This is an evaluation of the Namu's exterior. It's a match. Nagisa's confused. With what? Who? She corrects. And, Koro-sensei, the Namu's been injected with antimatter. I don't know how we never figured this out. If my predictions are correct, it should have the same abilities, super speed and regeneration included. It likely has more quirks as well, like enhanced strength for example. The only thing it lacks is free will and autonomy. Koro-sensei, when he'd been the Reaper, had been quirkless. Shiro had said that quirkless bodies can accept more quirks without losing brain function. If the goal was to have a way to control the overpowered creatures, to ensure that they'd follow orders, while being as powerful as possible, that could only mean one thing. Koro-sensei had been a failed Namu. What should we call this place? Ryo had wondered out loud. It had been the first time someone brought it up. I've been saying base in my head, but wouldn't that sound weird to anyone listening? She'd made a good point. You could just say home or something, Isegai had suggested. Saying something like HQ would be even more suspicious. Ryo had pulled a face. It's more like a hideout than anything. Before we cleaned it out, it was barely better than an abandoned building. Mihara had snickered. Oh, I don't know, maybe because it was an abandoned building. He deserved the book thrown at him, Ryo swears. As they'd argued over the specifics of the work they'd done to turn the place into something respectable as a living space, Irina had poked her head into the room from their kitchen. It reminds me of when you guys had to remodel that school. You were all running around carrying things like little busy bees. Bees fly, not run, Heizama had pointed out helpfully. Kurahashi, on the other hand, had gasped, snapping her fingers. That's it. The hive. Huh, get it? Busy bees, so our home can be the hive. Like a beehive. That's stupid, Heizama had said, but she'd been interrupted by Irina's squeal. That's cute, I like it. Nagisa had accepted. Then and there, that their place was now the hive. Once Irina makes up her mind, there's rarely a point in fighting it. By the way, Ryo had asked curiously, how are we going to deal with the kitchen situation? Government bases don't really need them. And it's not like we can just hire a renovator when this building is supposed to be empty. Irina had given a sly smile. I've been working on contacting some old friends, or their relatives, at least. Kimura had furrowed his brows. I don't know if you've noticed, but we're, like, in the future. I don't think I even remember the names of my great-grandparents, let alone anyone beyond that in my family tree. She'd brushed off his words. Oh, let's just say that these people place a lot of importance in family trees. Well, that wasn't suspicious at all. What? You make it sound like you know an Italian mafia boss or something, Mihara had snorted. Irina had closed her eyes and hummed. Dimentici chi conosco di ling. Ritsu translates, you forget that I know 10 languages. Oh, Nedzu has some police he's got connections with come pick up the unconscious thugs littering the USJ floor. They're handcuffed and led away for interrogation as they wake up. Unfortunately, they don't know much about their employers, just that they were aiming to kill All Might and were paying the criminals to deal with the students. Just as Nezu had hypothesized, Nagisa stretches an arm above his head, hearing one side of his spine crack satisfyingly. Chiba grimaces and inches away. As everyone gathers at the edge of the USJ, Ritsu pulls up some stats she'd collected. From what we know, the Namu, while injected with antimatter like Koro-sensei, likely has vast differences in its skill set. When Shiro turned the Reaper into Koro-sensei, there weren't enough quirks strong enough for him to create all of Koro-sensei's abilities. He was most likely able to manufacture and manipulate a few quirks on his own. On the other hand, quirks are now common enough that he could have skipped that phase entirely on this Namu. We know that their goal is to kill All Might. Assuming that Koro-sensei was a sort of prototype, it seems like Shiro wants to make them as powerful as him but still lacking the autonomy to escape or disobey him. Hayami fiddles with her sniper rifle. What do you think its abilities are? My guess is that since speed made Koro-sensei practically invulnerable, it likely has a form of super speed. However, I believe it isn't as powerful. The smart thing for Shiro to do if he wants a heavy hitter to go up against All Might would be to sacrifice a bit of speed for some strength quirks, maybe even a type of shock absorption or shock nullification quirk. They would be the most useful when going up against All Might. I'm also assuming that with the inability to think for itself, mental quirks can be taken out of the equation when considering what it can do. As Ritsu goes into depth about the Namu's predicted abilities, Nagisa makes a mental note to buy some notebooks when they get back to the hive. He should really pick up his note-taking hobby again. It could be useful when separating Koro-sensei's known weaknesses from the Namu's. A quiet shuffling noise has the group snapping to alertness. Nagisa sees it the moment Karma does, a patch of the ground seeming to flicker, a faint silhouette of a man visible for a split second. He's barely 5 feet from Nagisa. Camouflage quirk. Fuck. He must have used it to escape arrest when he regained consciousness, meaning he's disoriented but unhurt. As everyone whips out their weapons, Nagisa pulls out his tranquilizer handgun and barely has to aim before pulling the trigger. He seems to glitch before fully materializing, a knife falling from his limp hand. There's a collective sigh of relief, and guns and knives are put away one by one. That was close, Karma comments, trailing off as his eyes slide past Nagisa. Nagisa stiffens as he hears a horse ribbit from behind him and slowly turns around. Midoriya, Todoroki, Jiru, Bakugo, and Asui stand there, staring at the group. Shit, thank you all for meeting on such short notice. Nezu's gaze sweeps past the occupants of the room. After the Class 1A students, and Shinsu, had sworn to secrecy about Class 3E, Nezu had dismissed them and called in the staff in charge of the sports festival. Most of the 3E students had left as well, and the teachers present had changed out of their costumes. Classes had ended a while ago, and it's weird to see the pro heroes in regular clothes. Yamada is wearing a faded cowboy bebop shirt with CU, Space Cowboy printed on the back. Kayama is in sweats, the same as Aizawa, and Ishiyama is wearing a baggy t-shirt. Kan is in a red hoodie that reads Anti-Social Social Club. Ooh, Nagisa wants one. Shuzenji is in a floral button-down. They seem confused as to why 3 hero course students are there as well. Nezu gestures toward them. This is Ryo, Nagisa, and Karma from Class 1A. Ryo and Karma's legal guardians work for a branch of the Ministry of Defense based here in Musutafu. They've received an anonymous tip about an attack on the sports festival, and these 3 were with them when the tip came in. I've gathered us here for a few reasons. Nagisa is glad he was able to convince Nezu to let him stay despite not technically having legal ties to his guardian. It's fairly believable that he was hanging out with his friends when they got the call. Anyway, first, I'd like to ask that nothing we say leaves this room. It would only cause unnecessary panic among the student body. The tip is not a definitive warning. It's speculation from an unknown source. We haven't yet discerned whether it's reliable or not. Bullshit. Nagisa doesn't like where this is going. I've upped the security surrounding the stadium, as well as the cybersecurity within the... Wait. Nezu turns to Karma. You talk as if the sports festival is still being held. There's tension in the air as Nezu blinks. It is. Karma stands so suddenly that his chair screeches as it's pushed backwards. Are you serious? Nezu nods. Your reasoning. With added security there will be minimum Rai. The tip said they have a warp quirk. What can security do about that? Kayama shoots a warning look at the redhead for interrupting Nezu. Canceling the sports festival would send the wrong message to whoever is behind these attacks. Says Nezu smoothly. It would be akin to admitting that we cannot afford to fend off any attackers, therefore making UA look weak. Karma scoffs. So you're placing reputation above your students' safety. That's an idiotic decision for someone so smart, he argues. Aizawa is the next person on their feet. Don't speak to Nezu like that. Nagisa is torn. He's never seen Karma this riled up, and showing such blatant disrespect toward the staff will do nothing in their favor, but Karma's right. This isn't like the USJ. as a nationally broadcasted event. There's no way to postpone, modify, or relocate the sports festival in any beneficial way. They have solid evidence that Shiro will attack. And unlike last time, the festival comes with an entire stadium of potential hostages. Risking that many casualties doesn't seem worth it to Nagisa. He shares a glance with Ryo, and neither tries to stop Karma. Arina and Karasuma seem to have the same idea. Nagisa meets Karasuma's eyes, and the man gives an almost imperceptible nod. It needs to be said, the sports festival is an important event, Ishiyama interjects. It shows the world the next generation of heroes. People want to know that they're in good hands. Plus, Kan adds, it's a crucial experience for all the students participating. Disbelief and exasperation wore on Karma's face. Don't you think that when it comes to protecting the world, the next generation of heroes has to be alive to do so? The very fact that it's displayed to everyone on TV just allows villains a free show of all their quirks and weaknesses. They're still young, and this is the worst time possible for that with Shiro out and about. He whirls around to Aizawa. Are you seriously okay with this? It's not like before. People might get hurt. You're not in control of the situation this time. We should at least wait until we have more information to hold it. It doesn't matter what I think, Aizawa responds. The final call goes to Nenzu, and I trust him. I thought you were better than this, Karma mutters. Yamada stiffens. That's your teacher you're talking to. Show some respect. You don't even know that the attack will happen, or that it will be a big deal. You don't know anything, Karma snarls. Stay out of my way. He stalks to the door, turning back one last time to meet Aizawa's eyes. I've only ever respected one teacher, and it's not you. The door slams shut behind him. Karasuma had told the students their official story on the short walk from the train station to UA. We have two, actually. One for the students who saw you and another for the staff in charge of the sports festival. We're not telling the staff, other than the Hero Course homeroom teachers and All Might, about the whole Shiro thing. Ryo had raised a thin eyebrow. That seems like a hassle. Why don't we just say the same thing to everyone? It would be more convenient. No, I wish it were that easy, Arina had sighed. There's a few issues, though. We were originally planning to invent a story of those of you seen at the USJ actually being involved with the government and working on a case. However, we decided that it would ultimately raise suspicion surrounding you guys and prove that you're involved in something of that nature by choice. It's far better for the Wanna kids to think that you're all normal students who were thrust into a terrible situation and couldn't do anything about it. It places less attention on you than, say, letting them think that you're part of the government and have an active role in all this. She had sighed again, and Nagisa hadn't noticed until then how tired she looked. I was against the idea of telling them about Shiro at first, but after giving it some thought, the fact remains that Nenzu would never send children into danger if he thought they were incapable of handling it, whether he helped them or not. They've already seen you dealing with Shiro's men at the USJ. The fact that you were frozen and yet could still hear his plans is a good cover as to how you'd be able to deal with him, at least for now. You know what he's capable of, and are already involved, hence the deal with Nenzu. Karasuma had cleared his throat as they'd reached the UA gates. It's already a pain that the students know, and we don't need the information spreading any further. Nagisa had winced a little. They had gotten careless. We don't know how it may get back to Shiro, so we've agreed to keep it as private as possible. Nenzu has agreed to only inform the rest of the staff if he deems it absolutely necessary. Hayami had hummed. It's a good thing we have the principal backing us. This would be a lot more difficult, otherwise. They'd gone over what they'd be discussing in the second meeting. Nagisa had wondered how the staff would react to the sports festival being postponed in favor of gathering information to stop any potential attacks. He'd blinked up at the cerulean sky, slipping his hands into his pockets. I hope it goes well. When Ryo and Nagisa catch up to Karma, he's got his hands curled into fists and is taking deep breaths. Ryo is the first to speak. Are you gonna tell us what that was about? Karma sags against the nearest wall, tilting his head back. What, you think he's making the right call? No, of course not. But I've never seen you that outwardly angry before. No matter how you look at it, that wasn't a normal reaction for you. After a moment of silence, Nagisa walks to Karma's side, sliding down the wall until he's sitting on the ground. Ryo does the same on his other side. Karma laughs bitterly. It's a hollow sound. I think it's starting to get to me. There's a pause as he gathers his thoughts. Of course, under that quirk, I knew what was going on, but I didn't even know if we were going to get out of it. Ever. Now that we have, and there are all these new people, a new society, it's starting to sink in. He pauses to take a slow breath. They're gone. Everyone we knew. They all died ages ago. And we just got stuck. This isn't our world anymore. I mean, it is, but we should have died over a century ago, and I can't help but think about how out of place we are. I mean, this is our life now, but it still feels temporary. Ryo rolls a rock against the ground under her shoe. I know what you mean. And Koro-sensei, Nagisa murmurs. It hasn't even been that long. Well, if you cut out the time that we Yeah, I was upset, Karma says slowly, consideringly, because they don't know. We were so close to saving him. And we could have, with that drug. You heard it too, there was a less than 1% chance of him exploding. My point is that even though things are going in the right direction, I mean, you can prepare all you want. They could prepare for the sports festival by tightening security 1,000,000 times over. But the point still stands that the worst could still happen anyway. Nagisa finishes. Murphy's fucking law, Rio mutters. Nagisa snorts. Karma nods. They could prevent it. They could prevent it like we couldn't back then. They have the chance to save people, and they're throwing it away. I just don't understand. Their priorities are all off. All they need to do is postpone the event or try to investigate before it happens. It's frustrating, Nagisa agrees. But wow, I didn't expect you to talk to Aizawa like that at all. Karma groans. I don't have the best track record with teachers, I know. He seems all right, Rio interjects. A little rough, but well-meaning. Nagisa nods. Just give him a chance. They get a sigh and a yeah, good enough for now. Nedzu's decision is final. He'd also insisted that Shiro must already know that the 3E students are at UA because of the USJ attack. There's no reason for you all not to participate, were his exact words. He already knows you're attending UA. Nagisa doesn't think it's a good idea, but Karasuma and Irina's input had been acknowledged and then disregarded completely by Nedzu. So here they are, listening to Aizawa drone on about the importance of the sports festival which is taking place in a couple weeks. What? Hey, why are you blocking the door? Nagisa stops packing his bag to see what's happening. There's a crowd forming outside the classroom door. Bakugo growls that they're there to scout out the competition for the sports festival. It's likely because the top 3 scorers in the practical exam, as well as Endeavor's son, are in Class 1A, Asui speculates. They're bound to be curious. A boy pushes his way to the front, and Nagisa recognizes him from their usual lunch table. Shinsu, he thinks. Shinsu declares that the sports festival is his chance to get into the hero course and warns the students that they may lose their spots. He's joined by, oh, that's Yada and Terasaka. Yada grins at Rio and Karma, who are near the front. Hear that? She jokes. You'd better watch your back. Karma snorts at her teasing and walks up to Terasaka, who's cracking his knuckles. What? No challenge from you. His voice turns sly. Oh, I see. You don't want to embarrass yourself for when you fumble early on in the event, am I right? Terasaka growls, but Yada places a hand on his shoulder and smiles cheekily. We'll see. Awa, did you guys make those for us? Keano nods enthusiastically, holding up her poster with Get Mnagisa scrawled out in huge lettering. There's glitter framing the edges. Mimura and Sujino hold posters with letters spelling out Go Karma and Come On Rio respectively. Under Karma's name, it says as a bitching glitter pen. Nagisa catches a glimpse of matching pink sparkle poking out from Terasaka's pocket and snickers. Kanzaki and Kadoka are holding 2 posters presenting cutouts of Hayami and Chiba's faces. The 2 sport matching embarrassed expressions. They're for good luck today, Keano explains. Sujino pouts, and it's incredibly endearing. We wanted to make them for everyone else, but they said it would bring unnecessary attention to them since we're such a large group cheering for a bunch of students in different courses. Isagai pats him on the shoulder, smiling sweetly. It's all right, we know you're rooting for us anyway. Besides, this is a major event for the hero students. They could get scouted. Wait, are you guys all coming? Most of us, Sujino responds. Those attending that academy in Shizuoka Prefecture have an exam today and can't afford to skip school. Rio hums. All right, well, we need to get going. Participants are supposed to show up early to change and everything. The UA students follow her to the train station where they wait until their train arrives. The ride gives Nagisa time to think. He still doesn't like the idea of Shiro watching them all participate on TV, but at this point they don't really have a choice. In a way, this is the starting line of their new lives. If they get scouted for internships, it will help solidify their chances of becoming pro-heroes. And that's the goal now, right? Nagisa decides to do the best he can while remaining cautious of a potential attack. He doesn't care much for attention, but he does want to see how he measures up to the rest of his year. When they reach the stadium, they're ushered by a pro-hero to their locker rooms. There seems to be a lot of pro-heroes hanging around, which reassures Nagisa a little bit. In the changing rooms, Todoroki singles out Midoriya with a declaration that he'll beat him. I'll be giving it everything I have, too, Midoriya promises, a fire in his pine-green eyes. The tension in the air snaps with a loud crunch. All eyes swivel to the corner, where Rio sheepishly puts her bag of chips behind her back. Denki snorts, and the class dissolves into laughter. The harsh atmosphere dissipates and the students begin to chatter until they're called out. It's about to start. I pledge that I will be number 1. As the crowd jeers at Bakugo's words, Nagisa tilts his head. That doesn't seem like condescension to him. It seems more like Bakugo is trying to hold himself to the highest standard possible. forcing himself to do well, maybe even challenge others to try to beat him. There's an unspoken try and stop me. I dare you left hanging. Kayama, in full costume, declares that the first round is an obstacle race. As the buzzer sounds, the start tunnel is suddenly filled with shoving and yelling due to the bottleneck exit. Nagisa lets his slim frame go limp, letting the jostling and swaying push him forward with the crowd's movement. He's not going fast enough. He crouches and skillfully weaves his way forward between legs. When he reaches the front, there's a layer of ice trapping everyone's feet to the ground. He carefully makes his way past them onto solid ground. From there, he starts running. As an entrance exam robot comes into view, Nagisa dodges the limb that flashes out toward him, scrambling up the green metal. As he nears the top, he finds an adequate handhold and grips it tightly. The robot rears back, allowing Nagisa to get closer to the ground on the robot's other side. He swings his legs and lets go, using his momentum to turn midair and skid into an awkward landing, facing the robot. It locks onto a new target, so he turns around and keeps running. The next obstacle is a chasm, filled with ropes connecting platforms of earth. It's called the Fall. If Yamada's loud commentary is anything to go by, Nagisa sees Karma out of the corner of his eye, swinging one hand in front of another. It looks scary, hanging under the ropes like that. But then again, Karma is definitely the type to do something like that. Nagisa doesn't think he'll ever forget that time Karma jumped off a cliff with a smile. Anyway, he decides to just crawl across, looking around for familiar faces as he goes. Midoriya seems to be doing the same. And there's Hatsune from support with a jetpack. No, some other gadget. Hayami is running across the ropes. Nagisa does a double take. He knows that she has good balance, but damn. After what feels like ages, Nagisa reaches the end of the fall. He estimates that there's around 10 to 15 people in front of him. He listens to Yamada's enthusiastic description of the final obstacle, a minefield, and he can't help it. Nagisa grins. Several examinees sputter in shock as a blue-haired blur moves past them, not setting off a single explosion. Nagisa has never been so grateful that their physical education training had included running up the mountain to their classroom. Avoiding rocks and grooves in the earth had taken similar movement, and it's mostly muscle memory that allows Nagisa to lengthen his strides. His physical strength may not be the best, but Nagisa is agile and lithe. He catches up with Karma and Hayami, who are right behind Bakugo and Todoroki. As they approach the finish line, a faint scream gets louder and louder until, Midoriya, what the fuck? His methods may be crazy, but they're effective. Midoriya snatches first place with minimal injury. Nagisa bends over panting as he crosses the finish line. 6th place, not too bad. He waits for everyone else to finish, and it's announced that the first 42 people to pass made it to the next round. The next round, which is a cavalry battle, teams of 4 or less. Poor Midoriya looks like he's about to cry. 10 million points is a lot. Headbands, point assignments. Everyone seems to already have an idea of who they want on their team. He looks around and spots Shinsu talking to a student he recognizes from Class 1B. He makes his way over and taps Shinsu on the shoulder. The boy turns around. Nagisa, right. Nagisa vaguely remembers replying. And after that, a fog falls over his mind as his face goes blank. Oh no. It's like that time all over again. He isn't in control of his body. He can't move, he has to get away. No, focus. Nagisa barely registers the thought, but he realizes that the fog in his mind isn't imagined. His thoughts are sluggish and don't come as quick or easy as they usually do. He tries to shift his facial expressions, but his body is at a disconnect with his mind. Out of the corner of his eye he sees a flash of red approaching. Karma socks him in the shoulder, and the jolt clears the haze around his mind. A quirk. Shinsu's. Hey, Karma greets, eyes sharp and suspicious. Wanna team up? He did that on purpose, Nagisa realizes. He must have realized I was unresponsive and tried to snap me out of it. He nudges Karma's shoulder in thanks and replies, yeah, sure. I was just asking Shinsu if he'd like to join. Shinsu eyes the two of them. Nagisa tries again. That was your quirk, right? Don't look so cautious. We still want to team up with you. All our friends are already in groups anyway. He scratches his head. Just don't use it on us again. Shinsu sighs and releases the other kid, Monoma, from his quirk. Monoma is beyond irritated that he has to team up with 2 Class 1 scoundrels due to the fact that everyone else is already in groups, but scoffs. Whatever, not like I have a choice. Shinsu tells them that if Nagisa is the rider, as the lightest of them, he can use his quirk brainwash to make other riders hand over their headbands. Monoma says he can be offensive or defensive depending on the need and their opponent. My copy quirk is super versatile, he brags. Nagisa nods. He's not wrong. They receive their headband. A fairly high amount of points from Nagisa and Karma's ranks in the obstacle race. Nagisa ties it around his head and readies himself atop the hands of his teammates as they get into a defensive stance. And start. The second Kayama announces the start of the cavalry battle. Nagisa's group shuffles to the end of the boundary, away from the chaos. Everyone's going for the 10 million, Karma muses. Pretty stupid of them. Getting a hold of it now would mean they have to defend it until time's up. Monoma smirks. Let's pick off some of the ones hovering around the edges. We don't need to come in first, we just need enough points to move on. He holds up a hand for Shinsu to high-five. He sees Shinsu's confusion and explains, I need physical contact to copy your quirk, and it lasts 10 minutes. Shinsu hesitates but complies. My mind control quirk activates by verbal response. It deactivates with a jolt or strong physical contact, like pain. Got it. If we act fast, the others should be confused enough to let us get away. We'll have to be careful, though. Do the people under your quirk remember what happens while it's active? No, it depends on their mental strength, as far as I can tell, but it's not like I've had many chances to test it out. Generally, it should be a relative blur. Mental strength. Nagisa remembers everything. Apparently spending 2 centuries able to think and do literally nothing else fits the criteria. Maybe those who've been affected by similar quirks can build up some sort of tolerance. The next couple minutes are spent in relative calm for Nagisa's team. They get close enough to each group for Monoma or Shinsu to get a response from the rider, and then Nagisa accepts the offered headband and they move on quickly. They work well together, coordinating without much issue. Nagisa's glad that Monoma can tuck away his distaste for Class 1A in order to advance to the next round. Karma seems to be winning him over as well. His sly attitude apparently something Monoma can relate to. He doesn't question them further when they say their quirks are useless for this round. When they sit comfortably in third place on the scoreboard, they slow their pace. They don't want to attract too much attention. On the other end of the stadium floor, Team Midoriya and Team Todoroki are duking it out. There's a huge wall of ice, explosions, a jetpack. Nagisa's so glad they decided to stay away from the action. What on earth? There's about a minute left, and the other teams seem to be getting desperate. The 10 million point headband switches possession at the last second. When time is called, Nagisa glances at the scoreboard. First place, Todoroki Shoto, Hayami Rinka, Yayarazu Momo, Kaminari Denki. Second place, Shiota Nagisa, Akabane Karma, Monoma Nito, Shinsu Hitoshi. Third place, Bakugo Katsuki, Ashido Mina, Kirishima Ijiro, Nakamura Ryo. Fourth place, Midoriya Izuku, Uraraka Achako, Ida Tenya, Hatsume. Seems like despite losing the 10 million point headband, Midoriya's team managed to scrape by. Nagisa scans the names again. From 3E, those that pass to the next round are Nagisa, Karma, Ryo, and Hayami. Based on the sports festival footage from previous years, the final round will most likely be a one-on-one fight, like a tournament. Nagisa wonders who he'll need to fight. Kayama announces a midday break for lunch, as Nagisa follows the crowd to the eating area. He pauses near the hallway wall to turn on his phone. Ritsu, the final round isn't actually randomized, is it? Nope. Ritsu claps her hands together. They actually have already finalized the tournament bracket. Would you like to see it? Nagisa considers it as he starts walking again. The hall has cleared out completely, except for Bakugo. Leaning up against the wall next to the corner, the teen puts a finger to his lips. Nagisa lightly pads over, hearing voices and realizing a split second later what's going on. He blinks at Bakugo, finger-spilling with his right hand and hoping that the boy knows the alphabet. It hadn't taken long to learn sign language with Koro-sensei as a teacher, but not everyone had learned such a vast skill set as Class 3. Todoroki. Midoriya. He tilts his head as Bakugo signs back a sharp yes, go away. He supposes it makes sense, with Bakugo's quirk as loud as it is. It's not all that surprising that the boy can sign. He lifts his hands. Why are you listening? Bakugo rolls his eyes. Cold Hot told Useless his life story. Useless made a stupid declaration in return. Useless? Nagisa wonders why Bakugo hates Midoriya so much. Bakugo peeks around the corner. They're gone. Nagisa opens his mouth, but Bakugo just stalks away. He looks contemplative, and less angry than usual. Todoroki's life story? Nagisa wonders what he'd told Midoriya. It's none of his business, of course, and he may be reading too much into it. But Nagisa swears that sometimes the guarded and carefully blank expression Todoroki wears reminds him of his own, when he'd had to deal with his mother. Shit. Ritsu's voice interrupts his thoughts. Sorry, you never got to answer earlier. Do you want to see the bracket? Nagisa sighs. No, it's fine. I need to catch up with the others, and the break isn't too long. I'll just find out with everyone else. It's near the end of break when Midoriya approaches Karma. Hey, can I talk to you for a second? His voice is quiet and unsure. For a moment, he reminds Karma of the Nagisa he knew before he joined Class 3E, timid and lacking self-confidence. He follows the freckled boy to a more secluded area. Midoriya fidgets for a moment, opening and closing his mouth. Karma sighs. Midoriya blurts, "Can you tell me what it was like?" He immediately snaps his mouth shut, face reddening as he waves his hands. And no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Karma gestures for him to continue. What was what like? You were alive when quirks were somewhat of a rarity, right? Karma nods. He sees where this is going. The question is why. That's right. The percentage was a lot smaller. Midoriya folds his hands, then lets go and starts to adjust his uniform. Yikes, he's so nervous that Karma doesn't know what to do. He's about to prompt Midoriya, but the boy beats him to it. I was just wondering, since quirks are the norm now, what was it like when they weren't? How were quirked people treated? What about the bias? And, as Midoriya starts mumbling, Karma places a hand on his shoulder. Startled, Midoriya slaps a hand over his mouth. Sorry, habit. I'm just curious, because, well, I was a late bloomer, like really late. And quirkless people aren't treated quite as well as quirked people, so... Karma can tell that this isn't the full truth. Midoriya isn't a very good liar. However, it's clear that this is important to him. I'm not sure, Karma responds honestly. I didn't know many quirked people directly, so it didn't affect me much. He taps a foot. People were split. Some thought of quirks as a gift. Others thought of them as more of an illness. That went away, though, as far as I can tell. They're normal now, and discrimination seems to focus more on mutant type and weak quirks. Am I wrong? Midoriya shakes his head. As for the quirkless, I wish I could say I'm surprised at the treatment of those without powers, but society has shown again and again how easy it is to turn on people who were once considered normal. Unfortunately, it's not unexpected. Midoriya glances around furtively before leaning in. But you don't have a quirk, right? How do you do what you do? I know you said you've trained, but... Karma tilts his head. Quirkless people aren't weak, We're just not crazy overpowered. 90% of quirks are useless in many given situations. For example, a bullet to the head means death unless you're part of the 2% or so of people that have a hardening, shielding, speed or healing quirk. Same goes for mind control. Offensive and flashy quirks are only put on a pedestal because of hero work turning into some kind of popularity contest. Midoriya nods, looking thoughtful. His hand twitches, as if he wants to write everything down. Before my quirk came in, he begins slowly, I wanted to be a hero more than anything. But looking back, I don't think I could have become a hero without one. He waves a hand, expression panicked, at Karma's frown. Not because I actually couldn't. He tries to clarify, tripping over his words. I mean, until I received my quirk, I never really tried to become a hero. He struggles for a second, straightening out his thoughts. I never tried to train, or go to a gym or dojo. I researched heroes, yes, but as a hobby. You and your old class, you all are so skilled. Not because of a quirk, but because of actual effort you guys put in. Seeing that made me realize how stupid I've been. I had a dream, but I didn't do anything to get there. The dream was useless, in the end. If I'd seen that earlier, I think I could have been a hero whether or not my quirk came in. He looks surprised at this revelation. I could have been a hero, without a quirk. After a moment, Karma makes a decision. He'd already talked to Ritsu. And if you end up fighting Shinsu, the purple-haired boy, he knows that Midoriya is going up against Shinsu as his first opponent. His quirk. Midoriya's eyes snap to his face. Karma settles on. Don't answer his questions or speak to him. Okay. The hesitant nod he gets will have to be enough. When everyone is gathered back in the stadium, the bracket is displayed. Nagisa scans the names for his own. Oh, fuck. He's going up against Bakugo. Nagisa's not stupid. He doesn't undervalue himself, and he knows that he could probably kill Bakugo like he did to Takehaka. He's a natural-born assassin, after all. But this isn't that. This isn't an arena, displaying his assassin techniques to all of Japan. No, the whole world is something he wants to avoid. Some of the moves Lovro has taught him work best with the element of surprise. It would be a waste to showcase it to everyone, revealing his trump cards to his allies and enemies alike. Also, this is just a student event. It may be because of their situation, but Class 3E knows that it isn't as important as it's made out to be. Yes, it's a huge opportunity, but the sports festival is just a stepping stone into the world of heroics. Most eyes are on the second and third years, anyway. Nagisa doesn't think he'll mind all that much if he loses. He's not a brawler like Karma. He's more like a snake, lying in wait and then striking at the right time. The sports festival just happens to be suited to daylight hero wannabes, not the underground route Nagisa hopes to go. The first match is between Hatsume and Ida. Nagisa almost feels bad for Ida, being used as an advertisement and all, but Hatsume's energy is infectious. At least Ida gets to move on to the next round. Next up is Monoma versus Hayami. Wait, Monoma has a copying quirk, right? Shit, Nagisa doesn't think Hayami knows that. As the match starts, Hazashi introduces the two hero students. Hayami gets into a defensive stance, and it's Monoma who makes the first move, running forward. Hayami goes to block the jab he sends her way, and he taps her hand with his bare skin, grinning. His smile falters when nothing happens, and the two appear to exchange a few words before Hayami goes on the offensive. A few hooks have Monoma scrambling backward, and Hayami drops to the floor with her leg out. A quick sweep knocks Monoma off balance, and it doesn't appear difficult for Hayami to drag him to the nearest boundary line. Monoma pulls her to the ground, but she angles herself carefully and places her shoe soles against his core. With a quick push, he goes toppling over her head, his feet out of bounds. As Hazashi announces the win, the crowd cheers loudly. When Hayami makes her way back to the stands, Nagisa intercepts her. He tried to copy your quirk, right? Could he tell that you don't have one? Hayami sighs. Not exactly. I told him it was a weak balance quirk and that he probably already had good balance. He seemed suspicious but didn't question it further. We may need to keep an eye on him. She turns to watch Todoroki and Mina ready themselves in the arena, Hazashi's voice carrying to the audience loudly. He got cocky and decided to use my quirk instead of one of his classmates that he was more familiar with. I don't think he'll rely on his opponent for their quirk anymore. Nagisa nods. He needs to know that he should be prepared to fight people with quirks that are useless to H. Holy! The ice that covers the stadium reaches right up to Nagisa's face. What is Todoroki thinking? Karma lets out a whistle. Bad matchup. Nagisa turns to him incredulously. I'm pretty sure being matched against Todoroki would be a bad matchup for most people, Karma. Still, he wonders what's going on with the ice user. Maybe the talk with Midoriya had something to do with it. The next pair to fight is Midoriya and Shinsu. Karma leans forward next to Nagisa. Shinsu appears to say something, and after a moment, Midoriya shouts something in response. Karma drops his head into his hands, groaning, as Midoriya turns around stiffly and begins walking toward the boundary line. I told him not to talk. I warned him, and what did he do? He talked. Nagisa isn't sure what happens next, but one moment there's a wave of sound, and the next, Midoriya is in a fist fight with Shinsu. Nagisa blinks, leaning forward. Did he break out of the quirk? How? And Shinsu is out of bounds. Midoriya wins. Nagisa resolves to ask Midoriya about it later. It would be useful to know. As Karma leaves to get ready for his fight, Uraraka and Kirishima face off. From the start, Nagisa can tell it's an unlucky matchup. With Kirishima's close-range quirk, he has no choice but to face Uraraka head-on. His hand-to-hand looks solid, but he can't dodge forever. All it takes is a tap on his hardened skin, and Uraraka is swinging his weightless body around, releasing him so that he flies over the boundary line. The crowd cheers as she fist pumps triumphantly. When Karma steps out of the tunnel, Ryo on the other side, Nagisa sighs. It's too bad they have to face each other first. The fight isn't extremely flashy, but it's exciting nonetheless. Both students are skilled in close combat. Karma's muscle and strength is balanced out by Ryo's agility, and the two exchange lightning-quick blows for a few minutes. Karma goes in for a right haymaker. Ryo reaches across her body to grab his wrist with her own right hand, turning to her left as she pivots in closer to his body, her back to his front. She stomps on his foot and kicks backward at his knee, forcing him to back up before she can elbow him in the gut. She gets closer, hands raised in front of her face. They dance around some more, throwing kicks and mostly dodging one another. It's Ryo's stamina that runs out first. The high kick she aims at Karma is slow enough for him to catch her leg, crouching as he turns to heave her full body weight over his head in a throw. She lands hard and begins to get back up when Hazashi announces Karma's win. She looks down, realizing that she's out of bounds. She sags, and Karma helps her up and fist bumps her. Nice fight. Yeah, watching Karma going up against Ryo brings back memories of their civil war. Nagisa remembers Karma using some of the same moves on him when they fought. The knee to stomach, those fluid hooks. Karma had fought to kill, Nagisa to save. Not that it mattered in the end. He shakes his head to clear his thoughts. He needs to get ready for his match. While Yaoyorozu and Kaminari's match is announced, Nagisa slips out of his seat to head to his waiting room. When he gets there, he stretches a bit before sitting to think about what strategies he can use against Bakugo. The match between Kaminari and Yaoyorozu is short and goes more or less how Karma had expected. Yaoyorozu creates an insulation sheet as soon as Hazashi signals the start of the fight, and Kaminari immediately crouches to the ground, paying no mind to the other girl's actions as he releases a large wave of electricity. As he stands with a blank expression, Kayama declares that he's unable to continue. Yaoyorozu wins. Karma should really talk to Kaminari about predictability and strategy. Not to mention, frying his brain like that has got to have consequences. It can't be healthy. He checks the bracket again. His next fight is against Uraraka. Zero gravity quirk? She doesn't seem to be great with quirkless combat, but she's not to be underestimated. Karma's seen how determined she can get, and she seems resourceful, too. It's too bad she's going up against Karma. He has experience avoiding hand contact during a fight, after all. Bakugo stands across from Nagisa, cracking his knuckles menacingly. As soon as start is called, he lunges forward, grinning widely. Take this. The explosion that accompanies his swing is aimed at Nagisa's face. A quick duck has Bakugo overshooting, jerking to a stop as Nagisa forcefully grabs his uniform from behind. He has to let go as the boy aims an explosion his way. He backs up to give himself time to think, but Bakugo closes in again quickly. Nagisa contemplates using the clap technique Lovero had taught him, but shuts the idea down quickly. He doesn't want to reveal it to everyone watching. Nagisa resolves not to give away any of his assassin techniques and instead use the close combat skills he has. Bakugo is relentless, sending punches and explosions his way. In the dust, it isn't hard for Nagisa to shrug off his jacket and throw it at Bakugo's face. Hopefully it will obscure his vision for a moment. He silences his footsteps and sneaks around to Bakugo's back. Something alerts him, though, because he turns around at the last second and grabs the front of Nagisa's shirt. His other hand comes around to punch Nagisa, and Nagisa jumps, wrapping his legs around Bakugo's neck in a triangle chokehold. For a moment, Bakugo wobbles. Nagisa is holding his hands toward his body, rendering his quirk useless unless he wants to explode himself. They teeter toward the line. Bakugo muscles him away, shoving him out of bounds with an accompanying explosion. Nagisa sighs as his Ashi calls the match. He was close. Bakugo gives him a considering frown before turning away with a familiar sneer. You're not bad. For a quirkless, anyway. Wow, Nagisa's honored. In all seriousness, though, he's surprised Bakugo acknowledged him despite knowing that he's quirkless, a fact he'd made his disdain for clear on several occasions. Or maybe it's because he's quirkless. Maybe Bakugo expected him to back down, to be easy prey. He tries to wave away the staff asking if he's injured, but someone ushers him to the nurse's office. He has some bruises and minor burn marks on his arms and face. Recovery girl is brisk but kind. She places a kiss on his forehead before handing him some gummies and shooing him away. And Nagisa thinks about it as he walks down the halls. He thinks that Yue relies on her too much. It's a large responsibility, shouldering the burden of the safety of the entire student body. Nagisa doesn't think he's seen any other medical heroes on campus, or even any assistants to help her. Yue has some events in which students getting injured is seen as normal, which is only accepted because they can get healed any time. Recovery girl is the reason that's possible. Nagisa thinks, in a way, that it enables an unhealthy mindset in students, that it's okay to get injured and that it's not a big deal. If something were to happen to the healing heroine, Nagisa makes a mental note to ask Nezu if they could give her a bodyguard or assistant. If villains were to attack, it would be smart to go after the one keeping everyone in good health. After all, Nagisa finally reaches the end of the hallway, heading back to the other students.
Karma's waiting for him. Why'd you hold back?
Didn't want to show all my cards. Shiro's still out there, Nagisa reminds him. Karma frowns. I still think you could have thought of something. Nagisa laughs sheepishly. He didn't exactly give me time to think of anything. It was a bad matchup, Karma admits, bumping his shoulder. You got to the final round, though. I'm sure you caught some hero's attention. Nagisa nods. Yeah, I hope so. How was the last round? Hayami lost to Ida. He used some super fast special move that pushed her out of bounds. It was a good fight, at least. He left right after, though. Something about a family emergency. Nagisa frowns. I hope everything is okay. Going by the bracket, if I win against Uraraka, I'd have gone up against Ida next. I guess whoever wins my next match gets an automatic win against him. Yeah, who's up next? Midoriya and Todoroki. Nagisa has an idle thought that this match will be interesting. Well, he's not wrong. Several broken bones, screamed words, and explosions later, Todoroki is announced the victor. He seems to be using his fire side too, though he looks conflicted after the match is over. Nagisa decides that he'll talk to the boy after the festival. He doesn't like the way Endeavor is looking at his son, or the way Todoroki responds. Karma appears after a minute, facing off against Uraraka. Nagisa isn't surprised at all that Karma looks so confident, setting his raw ability aside. This reminds him of a nearly identical situation they were put in a couple hundred years ago. Well, Uraraka is a girl and not a full-grown man, and she isn't a professional assassin either. But it still stands that just like when Karma had to fight Grip, letting his opponent get their hands on him means instant loss. The redhead dodges every attempt Uraraka makes to use her quirk on him. She doesn't tire easily, but Karma is able to guide them toward the boundary until he can swiftly kick her in the stomach. As she stumbles past the line, Karma's win is greeted by some confused cheers. It may have been anticlimactic, but Nagisa knows that Karma ended it as fast as he could, unable to afford drawing it out in case she came up with a different strategy. The next fight is between Yaoyorozu and Bakugo. Nagisa thinks that it's Yaoyorozu's hesitation and self-doubt that do her in. Every slight pause where she second-guesses herself gives her another disadvantage against Bakugo's overwhelming power. She'd be doing herself a favor to better learn how to use the variety of weapons she makes herself, as well. The next match is an automatic win for Karma due to Ida's absence. Todoroki versus Bakugo, then. Nagisa is unsurprised at the scale of their battle. Ice shards litter the ground, and the light from fire and explosions alike is as sudden as it is blinding. In the end, Todoroki doesn't use his fire side for some reason. Another thing to ask about. Bakugo is furious. He yells as Todoroki is taken away on a stretcher, demanding to know why he'd held back. Unaccepting of a win that wasn't a true win, When the final fight is announced, the crowd goes wild. Karma stands on one end of the arena, Bakugo on the other. The explosive boy is practically bristling in anger. Karma appears to provoke him, and Nagisa sighs. It may help, as anger often leads to sloppiness, but does Karma really need to antagonize the most volatile member of their class? The start of their fight is just a blur. There are loud explosions, each missing their mark as Karma weaves his way around the arena. The two near each other and clash in a swirling mix of fists and expletives. Karma ducks under a vicious right cross and claps his slightly cupped hands over each of Bakugo's ears. Nagisa winces. Done hard enough, that can be not only disorienting, but also extremely painful. He knows Karma is careful enough to not leave any lasting damage, but Bakugo stumbles backward. It's this split second that Karma lunges forward, pushing Bakugo to the ground. As they roll across the ground, Bakugo letting off explosions in an attempt to control their direction, Nagisa realizes how close they are to the edge of the boundary. Karma gets a knee under himself, headbutting Bakugo's shoulder as he tries to stand. Bakugo sees the white line behind Karma and pushes the two of them forward, releasing little sparks in his palms as he practically tackles Karma downwards. A quick twist of positions, and the first person to hit the ground outside the line is. Bakugo is out of bounds. Karma wins the final round. Nagisa joins the crowd in their applause. He leaves his seat to congratulate Karma, joining the heroes near where the podium will rise from the ground. There's a ruckus, and Nagisa furrows his brows as he goes to see what it's about. When he catches sight of Bakugo, his blood boils in a rare moment of true anger. His voice is quiet, but it cuts through the air like a scalpel. Whose idea was this? The staff all go silent as their gazes turn to where Bakugo is chained to the second-place podium like some sort of wild animal, gagged by a heavy metal piece. He's not cooperating. Kayama tries to interject. Karma scoffs, and it's bitter. So that means you can fucking chain him up like that. This is dehumanizing. Some of the teachers look away as he continues. This is a festival. A festival. If someone doesn't want to receive their award, their medal, they don't have to. Whether they feel like they don't deserve it or for any other reason, nobody should be forced to. This is humiliating. It remains implied that he's talking about the hero's decision, not Bakugo's position. Nagisa steps forward, taking a deep breath. I think you should remove his bonds and let him decide not to accept his award. Why on earth would you force him like this? Cementos undoes Bakugo's chains with a guilty look. He was going to attack us. Karma snorts. Maybe because you were trying to restrain him and force him in front of a crowd in chains. When All Might gives out medals to Todoroki in third place and Karma in first, the empty second-place platform seems to demand attention. Nagisa still thinks it's better than the alternative. As All Might steps back and turns to address the audience, a dark silhouette in the sky seems to get larger and larger. Nagisa is completely on guard by the time it's identifiable, and his heart drops into his stomach. The winged Namu grips Karma in its claws, and All Might turns around a split second too late as it takes to the sky. When the winged Namu grips Karma in its claws, All Might turns around a split second too late as it takes to the sky. Within the next 3 seconds, multiple things happen at once. Mount Lady enlarges herself to her full height, snatching the Namu out of the air. Karma pulls a shaved down but familiar green knife from his shoe and slices the Namu's feet until it drops him. All Might leaps the 40-ish feet into the air and catches Karma, holding him carefully as he lands heavily on the ground. Kamui Woods extends his branches, binding the Namu up in a tight cage of wood as Mount Lady loosens her hold. As Hizashi uses the loudspeaker to try and calm the audience, it's All Might's loud reassurances that have everyone actually listening. They evacuate the stadium, although the Namu is already in custody and there doesn't appear to be any other intruders. In Nedzu's office, the staff and a couple 3E students gathered to discuss what happened. Karma is seething with righteous fury, and I told you so practically written on his face. I said this would happen. Things could have gone a lot worse, you know. We had it under control, didn't we? First things first, Karma. Why do you have a knife in your shoe? First things first. What do you mean, first things first? It's not. I don't know. Let's talk about the fact that Anama was just sent to abduct a student from under your noses. Nedzu stares at him until he relents. He pulls out the green knife, bending it against his hand. It's not even real. It cut that thing, though. The government created these to defeat the villain we faced all those years ago. The Namu are similar and have some of the same weaknesses. They still have some. My guardians found them with other government property. And you just carry around a knife with you everywhere. It's a comfort item. Snipe recoils. Your comfort item is a knife. When are you not carrying a gun? Karma fires back. That's different. I'm a pro and you're a child. I'm not a child. Karma hisses. I'm older than you. The cowboy hero draws back, mouth snapping shut. And yes, maybe that doesn't count since I couldn't do anything about it. But, you know, I thought I'd go insane. I watched the world change and barely hung on to the hope that someday I'd be free again. None of you know what that's like. I didn't endure all that just to be looked down upon. So don't you dare condescend to me. The awkward silence is broken by Nedzu's nails tapping against his desk. There's no need to get so snippy. Like I said, everything turned out okay. And there wasn't really a chance of them actually succeeding. Karma rounds on Nedzu. And if they'd actually tried to abduct me? Nagisa blinks. Actually tried. He realizes what they mean a split second later. He didn't seriously think it would work, did he? Nedzu sighs. I don't think so. He knows the security is top-notch at the festival, with heroes patrolling the inside and outside of the building. For Shiro, this Namu was likely something he was willing to sacrifice for potential gain. What do you mean? Karma blinks. He didn't care if they succeeded or not. Nedzu nods. That's right. If they had pulled it off, the impact from abducting a student right in front of all these heroes, at a nationally broadcasted event no less, would have been devastating. Citizens would begin to question the safety and procedures of UA, and he'd have a student in his clutches. If he'd failed, there'd be no real harm done to him. The Namu is replaceable, as barbaric as it sounds, and he loses virtually nothing. He most likely didn't use the person with the warp quirk for this very reason. They're an asset he can't afford to give up. It could also have been an attempt on his part to gather information on the types of heroes we've employed the protection, now that he knows you're attending UA. Oh, Aizawa clears his throat. Has the hero team been able to get anything out of the Namu yet? Nedzu checks his computer. Unfortunately, no. It has yet to respond to any outside stimulus. We have scientists coming in soon to try and see exactly how the Namu operates, and heroes on standby in case they try to retrieve it with the warp gate. We've used an identification quirk and discovered that there had been a surveillance quirk used on the Namu, likely to gather video and audio for Shiro. It's safe to assume that he's seen everything the Namu has. Karma takes a deep breath, trying to calm himself. What's the media making of this? Nedzu pulls up an article on his computer and turns the screen so that everyone can see. Abduction attempt at UA first year's sports festival, foiled by heroes on site. Watanebeka, Musutafu Weekly. Luckily, the media has no knowledge of the planned USJ attack, and has no reason to believe that we could have known this was going to happen. There's no significant negative coverage as of right now. After all, they don't have any real reason to pounce on the decision to hold the sports festival with the knowledge of a possible attack. The decision you made, Karma reminds him sharply. Nedzu sighs. Yes, Karma, the decision I made. But look, everyone is safe, and the public is reassured. Things have gone far better than they could have. It was a logical sacrifice. Karma scoffs and folds his arms, but stays quiet. The staff are shifting uncomfortably. As much respect as they hold for the principal, Nagisa can tell that many of them agree with Karma. Nedzu is rational, but he appears to have a hard time straying from what he knows and acknowledging that he's wrong. This is becoming increasingly obvious with the way he's handling things. Nagisa lets out an uncharacteristic huff. This isn't going to work. All eyes in the room swivel to him, and his mouth goes dry. We all need to trust each other, to a degree. If we want any chance of stopping Shiro, we can't tear ourselves apart like this. We should, I don't know, pool all of our information and start planning. But you need to trust us, and that we know what we're doing. We may be quirkless and look young, but we have experiences that you guys don't. The opposite is true too, of course. We don't have your field experience, but I think that looking down on us will only hurt you. We'll also do our best to cooperate. He shoots a meaningful look at Karma. The redhead huffs, but Nagisa detects a hint of pride in his eyes. As he registers all the eyes on him and realizes what he's doing, he shrinks inward a little. I'm sorry, I don't know what got into me, No, Aizawa's voice is steady. You're absolutely right. It's a little shameful that nobody else said it first, or as well as you did. There's a murmur of agreement. I think we should divide the tasks, Hisashi suggests as the door opens. If we form smaller teams, it will be easier to connect with each other rather than needing to place your trust in everyone here all at once. We could do a couple 3E members with a couple staff members, maybe. Karasuma and Arena enter and sit down. catching the tail end of Hisashi's words. That sounds good, Karasuma agrees. Let's try it. As they sort out the duties, they come to a realization. For the recon team, it would be really useful to have Jiru or Shinu's quirk, Nagisa points out. I don't think we should drag them into this. It's dangerous, Aizawa interjects. It's even more dangerous to let Shiro do as he pleases. If we can get more information on him and apprehend him, things will be safer for everyone. We'll leave that up to them, Nezu decides. If they don't want to, we can find another way. Aizawa hesitantly nods. Are we asking all of the students who know about us? Nezu hums. I think that would be a good idea, seeing as you are already familiar with them. Again, we'll leave it up to the students how involved they want to be, and leave them alone if they wish to stay out of it. For safety, we'll have at least one adult for every 2 students. Nagisa notices that he's not calling them kids like the other staff. It's decided that Ishiyama will work with Ritsu and Asui on research, looking for quirk matches and identification, asking for online tips, and researching cases of people or their quirks going missing in past years. Yada, Isekai, Irina, and Aizawa will try to get information from the underground. Though the class 1 homeroom teacher was originally against it, Irina assures him that between the adults' experience and abilities, not to mention Irina's countless connections, the kids will be fine. They're also mature and level-headed, she declared. They'll stay out of trouble. If Shinsu and Jiru decide to help, Kayama will work with them to scout out any tips they get from the other teams, including possible locations. They plan to check out the location of Shiro's original base, though he most likely has already relocated and cleared out any trace of residence. Between their quirks, it's the team best suited for neutralizing threats safely and quietly if they run into any trouble. Recovery Girl will take Terasaka under her wing, showing him basic medical procedures and having him assist with supply organization. Karasuma and Kan will take Karma and Ryo, as well as Bakugo and Todoroki if they agree, to the training grounds every day. There, they'll train different aspects of their quirks or combat for Ryo and Karma. Todoroki still needs to learn to use his fire, and Bakugo could use some work on his quirkless fighting style. Between Nagisa's hobby of taking notes on Koro-sensei's weaknesses and Midoriya's knack for quirk analysis, they decide to join Nezu to make a comprehensive folder of the information they have on their opponents and plans to neutralize each of them. Itona is in charge of helping with resources, and with help from Majima, he'll work on restocking their weapons arsenal. Everyone else from 3E decides to stay out of it for now. Oh, one more thing, Aizawa says. Please be discreet. I've already had 2 students come to me with the worry that Nagisa, Ryo, and Karma have villains for parents, especially after that phone call. He turns his tired eyes to Irina. You're lucky I was able to ward off suspicion and say that we're dealing with it. She pointedly inspects her nails, humming. Karasuma sighs. The next day, Aizawa stands in front of the class with a mug as large as his face, presumably filled with coffee. Today, you'll be deciding on hero names, which I'm here to help with. The class startles at Kayama's entrance. Hero names should be catchy and reflect either your quirk or the type of hero you want to be known as. Start brainstorming, and I'll pass out these whiteboards. Nagisa joins Karma at his desk. Any ideas? Karma hums. Not yet. You, something snake-like, maybe? You've always said I give off that feel when we had our Asa. He quiets down. Our attempts with Koro-sensei. Ryo snickers, pulling up her own chair. You should go with slither, slither, slither. Nagisa groans as Karma laughs. Anything but that. Plus, the memory of those same words coming out of a widely grinning mouth is still fresh. The chatter dies down as Kayama asks for volunteers. Some are terrible, can't stop twinkling. Is this allowed? While others are cute, like Froppy and Tentacle. Some are just weird. Why would anyone just use their first name? Nagisa likes the name Midoriya chooses, Deku. He doesn't think he'd do the same, using an insult and all, but it's good to see that he isn't letting it chain him down. Eventually Ryo steps up. I want my hero name to be the Huntress. It fits with the bow and arrow I use. Sounds chic and dangerous. I'll take it. Ryo grins as she walks back to her seat. All right, Nagisa. You got one yet? Nagisa nods, walking to the front of the room. He exhales, then turns his board around to face the classroom. The Serpentine hero, slight, not of strong or sturdy build, small, unassuming. People tend to underestimate Nagisa. Anyway, Kayama licks her lips. It has a nice ring to it. Short and sweet, I like it. He sags in relief as he makes his way back to his desk. Next up is Karma. Nagisa doesn't know what to expect from the boy, but he somehow manages to surprise him anyway. The Reaping hero, Equity. Nagisa inhales sharply, earning him a couple concerned looks, which he ignores. Karma catches his eye. Nagisa can see a sad smile flicker across his face, and the redhead meets Ryo's knowing eyes as well. Reaping, because it's like you reap what you sow. It matches my quirk. Nagisa knows it's much more than that. In a way, it's like what Midori is doing, taking something from the past and turning it into something new. He's paying homage, too, for the original Reaper. And, well, he says, karma is a form of equity. After all, Nagisa gets around 40 internship offers. It's a little more than he expected, seeing how he got booted in his first fight in the tournament round. But he supposes that his tactics in the first 2 rounds and the little bit of sparring skill he showed must have gotten a little bit of attention. Despite winning the festival, Karma gets less offers than Todoroki by a small amount. It's probably a combination of having the number 2's name behind him and the overwhelming flashiness of his quirk. Ryo gets more offers than Nagisa but significantly less than the top 4 students. Nagisa scans his sheet for any familiar names. He looks up at the sound of Kaminari's excited voice. Dude, you got an offer from Best Jeanist? He's number 4. Bakugo puts his paper down. Guess he. Oh, no, don't do that. Absolutely not. Ryo makes her way to Bakugo's desk. The boy makes a face. Why not? He's the highest ranked offer I got. Ryo shakes her head. That means rat piss. You need to find someone compatible with your learning style. Let me see that. She snatches his papers, scanning it until she finds what she's looking for. Here, you got one from Mirko. And she's definitely a better option. From what I've researched, she's a carefree but strong hero. She loves to fight, and some people criticize her for speaking her mind too easily. Some even call her bloodthirsty. She's still popular, though, and is well liked by plenty. I think you'll be able to learn from her without feeling too constricted. Bakugo looks thoughtful. Ryo is suddenly crowded with students pushing their papers in her face. Calls of "Can you look through mine and who should I choose?" fill the air. Karma looks conflicted. He's gotten an offer from Endeavor, which should make him happy, but he doesn't really like the guy. Oh well, Nagisa's guessing he'll put his dislike aside to see if he can learn something. Pro Hero Ingenium disabled by Hero Killer Stain and Hasu, unable to return to hero work. Fujimori Miho, Hasu Hero Paper. Nagisa had frowned as he'd scrolled through the article under his lunch table. Ida's brother, right. So that's why he'd left the sports festival early yesterday. Come to think of it, Ida had been acting brisk and dismissive of his friends when they'd tried to talk to him at the start of class. Nagisa had made a mental note to try to talk to him about it. Bottling things up never helped anyone. When Karma had seen what Nagisa was reading, he'd been interested. Isn't Stain the guy that's been saying that heroes are fake? Some of them, Nagisa had responded absently. He thinks All Might's fine, though. Karma had snorted. Right. What about underground heroes, then? I don't actually know. He'd shot a teasing look at Karma. I'll make sure to ask the next time I see him. So, what are you going to do about Ada? He's like, about to boil over. Well, that had sounded ominous. I'll try to talk to him. I just hope he doesn't do anything stupid. Karma had nodded. I don't think he knows how to deal with this. It's not a situation a lot of heroes to find themselves in, and hero society insists on acting like everything is noble and shiny. There are going to be some tough things to deal with in heroics, and babying the students won't help. Nagisa had sat up suddenly. I should ask Nedzu if we can add a situational analysis class. Class 1 definitely needs it. From sorting out priorities to making the logical decision under pressure. I'll ask Karasuma about it, too. He helped us with that quite a bit. Good idea. Ryo had peered over Nagisa's shoulder, snapping a Pocky stick in half with her teeth. Speaking of changes, I've been thinking about making a request to Nedzu. Don't you think it would be smart to build dorms on campus so that we're always surrounded by pro heroes? You should bring that up next time. Nagisa had agreed quietly to avoid people overhearing. With us being targeted by Shiro, it's a solid point. The bell signaling the end of lunch had rung, leaving the group packing up their bags. I was thinking of interning with Pro Hero Manual. Nagisa frowns at Ida's stiff response. He racks his memory. Oh, shit. He's stationed in Hasu, isn't he? He begins awkwardly. I know we don't know each other well, but you can always talk to me. Ida looks surprised, but the tension doesn't leave his shoulders. He agrees, but Nagisa isn't convinced. He looks over his list. There, Manual. Ada might hate him for this, but he plans on making sure the guy doesn't do anything stupid. He circles the name. Ada is avoiding him. Nagisa doesn't know how that's possible, considering that their Manual's only 2 interns, but Ida manages it anyway. Nagisa doesn't take it personally. If anything, the other boy seems to be ignoring everyone. For one, during the quick tour of Manual's hero agency, Ida is quiet, nodding robotically once in a while, but not asking any questions. He only speaks when spoken to, which is a clear sign that something's up. All of his attempts to talk to Ida are brushed off. During the 2-hour training session on the first day, Ida stays until the end and not a minute longer. As he grabs a towel and leaves the room, Nagisa pads up to Manual. Manual, I have something to talk to you about. Manual walks to the back of the training room where he picks up his costume helmet and beckons for Nagisa to follow him. All right, shoot. It's about Ida. You've probably only seen him during the sports festival, but he's not acting like himself at all. Nagisa looks at his feet. I know it's a stretch, but I think He might try to go after the hero killer. Nagisa's eyes snap up to meet Manuel's knowing stare. Yeah, how? Manuel sighs. Nagisa, I know what happened to Ingenium. On top of that, I know that look in Ida's eye. Nagisa does, too. He's seen it on Itona before he'd escaped his bloodlust and left Shiro's side. I'm not a very well-known hero, and Ida got plenty of internship requests. He chose this one, stationed in Hasu, which can't be a coincidence. It's not unreasonable to think that's what he's after, though I do wish he'd think about it more. Then, don't worry, Manuel assures. We're only going patrolling 2 or 3 times, and it'll only be us 3. I'll be able to keep an eye on you guys no problem. And now I know you'll be watching him too. He won't get the chance to wander off even if the hero killer is still in the city. Nagisa hesitantly nods. Is that all you needed? Yeah, that's all. Okay, you can go finish settling and then, it's getting late. Nagisa thanks him before making the short walk from Manuel's office to his room. As he washes up, his phone goes off. He picks it up after the 4th ring. Hey, Nagisa. Nagisa groans at Karma's gleeful tone. What did you do? A dramatic sigh. Why are you so mean to me? What makes you think I did something? You have the voice. Nagisa turns off the light and shuffles into his futon, the bluish glow from his phone illuminating his face. What voice? Nagisa can practically hear him pouting. Your I've just fucked with someone and it made my day voice, Nagisa says dryly. A gasp. Did you just swear? Oh, little Nagisa is finally growing up. Nagisa catches a faint sniffle and wishes they were video calling so he could flip Karma off. So, who was your unlucky victim? Number 2. There's a pause as Nagisa processes. Wait, Endeavor. Yep, Karma says proudly. His voice goes a little quieter and infinitely more serious. You know why? Yeah, I do. But it's being dealt with. I know. But it can't happen soon enough. So, what did you do? There's a grin in Karma's voice. Well, I used his work email to sign him up for 3 different dating websites and got him a Pornhub subscription, so he should be getting some interesting emails soon. I also custom ordered an all-might dildo to his agency. As for my favorite, I emailed a wedding planning company and they're sending flowers and a card. No, let's see, if I typed in his future spouse's name correctly, it should read something like, congratulations on your engagement too. Think he'll like it. Nagisa chokes. Oh, and I also snuck into his office to empty out all of his staplers and remove the ink cartridges from all of his pens. Karma, what are you going to do if he finds out it was you? A snort. He has no proof. I was careful. All right. Nagisa readjusts his pillow. As long as you're sure. Anything else fun happen? Nah, not much, he sighs. We're going on patrol tomorrow, though. Okay, night, then. I'll keep you updated on the Enduhor situation. Nagisa tries and fails to keep a fond smile from his face. Night. Nedzu had folded his paws on his desk. This is a very serious accusation, I hope you realize. Nagisa had exchanged worried looks with Karma. With all due respect, we know that. We wouldn't have brought it up unless we really thought it was true. They'd gotten a long look. Ritsu, Todoroki's behavior matches that of many abuse victims. He's not emotionless, but appears blank due to his careful control of his expressions and lack of social prowess. He shows great discomfort when others talk about Endeavor, shown by a tension in his jaw and fists. The 2 most noticeable signs are the fact that he refused to use his fire completely until the sports festival, the quirk he inherited from his father, and the fact that he has a burn scar on the left side of his face. Considering that his skin on his left side is fireproofed against his own quirk, it means that the scar came from an outside source. His mother is also registered as a long-term patient in a psychiatric hospital, admitted by Endeavor himself. I've just caught wind of the death of the eldest Todoroki brother, kept even from the media. All things considered, it doesn't paint a pretty picture of Todoroki's home life no matter which way you look at it. Nagisa had been glad that at least one of their classmates' words held weight with Nedzu. It had made sense. Nedzu has always been a creature who values logic and calculations above all else. Ritsu has always been good at that, as a digital persona. Alright, I've had suspicions that the Hero Commission's been covering up something when it comes to that family. Not to mention covering the property damage costs and casualties from Endeavor's fights. He's got quite the forceful approach, often ending in villain and the occasional civilian casualties. I'll start to prepare a file regarding a potential court case for the abuse, which can be supported by shows of his temper and aggression as a hero. Nagisa had nodded. It won't be ready before internships, however, and I know that young Todoroki has requested to work with Endeavor for the week. I also know that the man's only 2 requests went out to his son and the winner of the sports festival. He'd turned pointedly to Karma. Have you decided yet? A nod. I'm going to intern with Endeavor too. I can keep an eye on him and Todoroki, plus it's valuable experience to train with such a skilled hero. Nedzu had spun his chair in a circle. You said that your friends are talking to Todoroki and his siblings, correct? It would be best to get the full story from them, since we cannot accuse the number 2 hero of something of this caliber without proof. If Todoroki agrees to help us, I'll give him something to gather evidence of Endeavor's abuse, like a small camera. Medzu had peered in surprise at the tiny, clear contact lens presented to him by Karma. Itona made it. With a certain blink pattern, it records the feed as well as saving a copy to a software he'll share with you. Brilliant. Medzu's beady eyes had been excited, with a hint of manic glee. Does it have audio as well? No, we have these, though. Nagisa had tapped his tiny earpiece, the color blending into his skin flawlessly. We could give him one, too. Besides, it's likely that Endeavor won't say or do anything suspicious or indicative of his treatment of his family. It would be a bit too public. This is just cautionary. Thank Itona for me. Aizawa had stayed quiet the entire time, eyes smoldering in quiet anger. As standoffish as he'd always acted, Nagisa had been able to tell early on that he harbors a protective streak for his students. He'd seemed to try to calm himself down, expression flickering from worry to anger and then back again. He'd never shown much love for the brash flame hero, but the man was number 2. It was hard to swallow that a person so many looked up to for his strength could have a cruel side that stayed so hidden. Nobody noticed due to the fact that they've been conditioned to see the world in black and white. And Endeavor worked in a profession that put him on a pedestal. It was disheartening, and spoke volumes about hero culture and society. May I make a suggestion? Go ahead, Nagisa. I think that you should make an offer to Todoroki to see the school counselor for therapy sessions. Hound dog, was it? At Nedzu's nod, Nagisa had continued. I think he could benefit from it. And not just Todoroki, actually. Both Bakugo and Midoriya have some issues to work through. Karma and I agree that Midoriya shows signs of dangerously low self-esteem, which when combined with his flinches at bright and loud stimuli may point to past abuse or bullying. Bakugo seems to have an unhealthy mindset as well, pushing himself to the top out of some fear of not being strong enough. I don't think it's just pride. It seems like due to his strong quirk, people have always had high expectations of him. That's what I've gleaned from our time in this society. Anyway, in his eyes, I wouldn't be surprised if being any less than the best would make him feel like a failure. I see. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll see what I can do. Anyone else? Nagisa had been beaten to it by Karma. Maybe. Hayami has mentioned Monoma, the kid with the copy quirk, a few times. It seems that his self-confidence is actually fairly low. And he puts on a front when it comes to class 1 due to his insecurity. This goes for his quirk as well. This bit is speculation on my part, but don't you think that someone whose power is to copy others' powers may have been looked down upon for not having one of their own and instead relying on other people? Ritsu had chosen this moment to inform them of a message she'd received from Ryo. Shirahashi and her empathy quirk were really helpful. She was able to set up a meeting with Todoroki, using her quirk as the reason that she could tell that Shoto had some trauma. Turns out Shoto is an oversharer. Not too concerned about who knows of his abuse, he's also extremely resentful of his father and willing to cooperate. Shirahashi just finished talking to the Todoroki siblings about their story. They're on their way. Nagisa had blinked. Then, that means they want to testify. Things have been pretty hectic lately, so I've been spending more time patrolling like we're doing now, Manuel explains. It helps suppress the crime rates when heroes are seen patrolling frequently, for obvious reasons. Nagisa nods as a group of civilians wave excitedly at the hero. You seem pretty popular around here. Ah, no. Manuel waves his hands in embarrassment. It's just because I'm a local face. I'm always in the area, so they know who I am. Humble, Nagisa notes. Straightforward, too. As the sky begins to darken, the trio reaches the midpoint of their patrol loop and starts to circle back. As you can see, usually, Manuel is cut off by a resounding crash. Nagisa whips around, bringing his arms in front of his body in preparation. He instinctively scans the tattered building that's shrouded by smoke, heart dropping as a familiar figure steps out of the wreckage. Namu. It's different from the one that was brought to the USJ. The snooping that Arina and Aizawa had done paid off. They know that the villain alias of the Namu's commander at the USJ is Mr. Compress. Nagisa doesn't see him. As other Namu lumber out of the shadows, chasing heroes and civilians alike, he realizes that their orders were likely to attack indiscriminately, causing chaos. But why? What's their goal? All Might isn't even here. The only notable thing that's in this city is the hero killer, Stain. Maybe they're allied. No, Stain thinks that All Might is the only true hero and Shiro wants to kill him. He'd talked frequently about killing the One for All holders, especially All Might, while 3E was frozen. As Manuel works with other heroes to fend off the Namu, Nagisa's thoughts come to a screeching halt. Stain. Ada. Where's Ada? Whipping around, he catches a blur as Ada speeds around a corner, using the chaos to slip away. Shit. Nagisa slides one of his own green knives from his shoe, glad he'd decided to copy karma after the sports festival incident. He spies an elderly hero clad in yellow whose quirk seems to assist him with speed, skilled but unable to deal any damage to the brain-dead creatures. Nagisa runs over, giving a shout as he tosses the knife to the hero. He can deal with the consequences later. Use this. It can cut the Namu's skin. Nagisa doesn't wait for a response, sprinting the way Ada had gone. Shit. He's been gone for at least 10 seconds, which is plenty of time to get far away with Ida's quirk. Nagisa does his best to speed up, following the skid marks on the ground until he reaches an alley, where Stain pauses, katana poised over Ida's unresponsive body. Paralysis. Another hero wannabe. Leave now, this doesn't concern you. No, you're going to kill him, right? What's he doing? Honestly, Nagisa doesn't really know. He's hyper-focused on Ada's limp figure. He's a fake hero, seeking me out for revenge. He must be culled. Hero society is overrun by entitled so-called heroes who only want the fame and glory of the job. The only true hero is All Might. Nagisa wants to groan at Stain's declaration. He really does. Instead, he reaches up to scratch his head, discreetly tapping 3 times at the device behind his ear. Emergency signal. He hopes other 3E kids are nearby. What about underground heroes? They don't get any fame, yet they always fight to save people. At Stain's hesitation, he plows on. And how can you say that about a student who hasn't even had time to grow and change? He won't, Stain hisses. He's shown his true character. I'm a necessary force, here to keep the fake heroes in check. A hysterical laugh bubbles out of Nagisa's throat, surprising even himself. Are you stupid? Stain blinks, then narrows his eyes. What are you? Do you even hear yourself? Okay, wait, no, let me think about how to put this. Nagisa pauses to sort his thoughts, ignoring Ada's pleas for him to leave. Stain stares at Nagisa incredulously, probably shocked that he isn't leaving, but rather trying to talk. He hurls a knife at the smaller boy, who absent-mindedly dodges. Oh, I've got it. So imagine a bush, right? And it's sitting in poisoned soil. This bush is the hero system, right? And the leaves are heroes, making the soil the foundation. Are you following? Stain just stares. Is there a point to this? At this moment, Midoriya runs past the alley, screeching to a halt as he catches sight of what's happening inside. There is, I promise. Okay, so because of the poisoned soil, a bunch of the leaves are turning brown. They're supposed to be green, right? But some of them are growing the wrong color, brown, as part of the system. What you're doing, killing fake heroes, is like you're taking clippers and snipping off each leaf, one at a time. Right, you're cutting off each individual leaf, but you have to understand, more are just going to take their places. Is Nagisa crazy? Maybe, but he needs Stain to realize how idiotic he's being. Midoriya is gaping. He pulls out his phone, but Nagisa motions that he's already called for help. Stain sprints toward Nagisa, and only a year of physical endurance and speed training allow him to pivot and leap onto a dumpster, jumping back over Stain's head and landing his roll in a crouch. What you're doing, the difference you think you're making. It's nothing. You're not doing anything to help. You know what you should do. Change the goddamn soil. It's poisoned, and changing the structure of the broken system would change the way heroes act, too. I mean, have you never thought about this before? The system of popularity and rankings, it fosters greed. Stain, for the first time, looks contemplative, though no less hostile. Is this why you want to be a hero? To change things from the inside? Nagisa blinks. Kind of. It's not the only reason, but hero society is screwed up. I know that, trust me. If I can help people, though, I'm going to take that opportunity. And, you know, I've read articles about the heroes you've killed. And believe me when I say, by killing them, you've helped cover up the crimes you've slain them for. No, I got rid of fakes. I did society a favor. Nagisa gives him a dry smile. Have you seen what everyone else sees, though? It's a hero, previously under investigation for this or that, laundering or corruption, killed by a villain. Suddenly, people only look at the good sides of them. The world sees things as black and white under this system and refuses to look for bad sides in the people they think of as good. Everything gets swept under the rug. Good hero killed by bad villain is what it becomes. And all of the civilians side with the hero. You turn them into tragic losses, when in your eyes, they were everything wrong with society. Stain appraises him for a second. You're interesting. If I were feeling more benevolent, I might even spare you. As of right now, though, you're spouting meaningless platitudes. He crouches, blades in hand, as his eyes narrow. You shouldn't have spent all of this time talking. Nagisa lets a smile creep over his face, blue eyes practically glowing. Stain freezes as a chill settles over the alley. Neither move. The atmosphere becomes suffocating, stifling, meaningless. Are you trying to convince yourself that you haven't been wasting the past few years of your life? His words are followed by a thud as Stain's stiff body hits the ground. Nagisa raises his gaze to where Karma stands, an empty tranquilizing capsule dart in hand. You're lucky I was able to slip away from Endeavor. Nagisa sighs and walks over. I knew at least somebody would be in the area. How long will he be out? Karma shrugs. Couple hours. Karma's gaze shoots to Midoriya, who's helping a now mobile Ida stand. Should we call in some heroes? Endeavor is coming. Nagisa looks up at the new voice. Todoroki stands at the entrance of the alley, looking at Karma. I saw you leaving and followed you, he explains. His gaze slides to Stain's slumped figure. Is that the hero killer? Other heroes gather, and the old hero from before starts scolding Midoriya. He spots Nagisa and tosses back the knife. I don't know why you have something like this, kid, but thanks for letting me use it. Nagisa catches it. I can explain later if you want, or if you know any of the UA staff you can ask them. On a distant rooftop, a masked man watches the heroes mill around the unconscious hero killer. Despite our differing goals, Stain has proven to be a valuable asset to keep the show exciting. I believe that we can do so much more. Sensei will no doubt see the value in having a pawn like him. Turajiri. When a misty purple vortex opens up underneath Stain's body, the heroes can do nothing as he falls into the portal. It closes again and disappears within a split second, not giving anyone a chance to react. Hero killer Stain and Hasu, reformed or planning something. Akagi Mai, Hasu hero paper. After a close call last week in which pro-hero Endeavor nearly brought the hero killer into custody, heroes have noticed something strange. There's been no new kills from Stain as of yet. Though the circumstances are unclear, the question remains, has Stain had a change of heart, change of plans, or is he just biding his time? Pro-heroes assure the public that they're doing everything they can to apprehend the hero killer, regardless of his current behavior.